Kaelen Vrast woke up screaming. The scream had nothing to do with the small attic bedroom he was in, or the cold spring wind coming through the broken slat in the window, or the smell of pine and damp wood that meant cabin, mountain, late season. The scream came from the 8 seconds he had just lived through that did not belong to him. A library carrel, a red lamp, a coffee, a flash of headlights in a window, a hospital ceiling, a flatline, then dark, then this. He stopped screaming. He sat up. The body he was in was thin, 17, dark-haired, scarred along the left forearm in 3 long stripes that looked like claw marks healed badly. The hands were unfamiliar. The teeth, when he ran his tongue across them, were the wrong shape. The mind that had owned this body up until 8 seconds ago was somewhere, or gone. He didn't know which. It had been a polite handover. No fight. The previous tenant had stopped existing, and he had moved in, and the apartment still smelled of the old one. The name surfaced first. Kaelen Vrast. Then its life in slow bleed. Mother and father dead 2 months ago in a cave collapse outside the Southern Pass. No siblings. A scholarship slot at Veilcourt Academy he was supposed to take up in a week. A weight in his belly that had been called hobgoblin core, the kind of magic organ every monster in this world was born with. The hobgoblin core inside Kaelen Vrast was, by every test his parents had ever run, weak. Stunted. The runtiest core in the southern range. The reason his parents had drilled into him, since the age of 4, that he must never under any circumstance let anyone test him at the school. Because if anyone tested him, anyone with eyes, anyone with a sniffer-spell or a soul glance, they would not find a weak hobgoblin core. They would find no core at all. They would find a human. Kaelen Vrast, the new occupant of this body, late of a 4th-floor walk-up apartment in a city in a different world, killed at 26 on a crosswalk by an SUV that had run a red, sat on the edge of the bed in a wood-shingled attic in a world where his species had been hunted to extinction 900 years ago, and where his existence, if discovered, would convert the entirety of monster civilization into a single coordinated hunt for him. He laughed, once very dry. "All right then," he said. He stood up. He looked in the small mirror nailed to the wall. The face that looked back at him was sharp-jawed, pale, with eyes the deep green-gray of ocean water under cloud. 18, almost 17. The face was, he registered with the distant clarity of a man taking inventory after a fire, good. The kind of good a stranger noticed. The kind of good that would, in this world, mean every single eye in any room he walked into. The realization sat in his chest like a stone. He needed to be invisible. He had a face that did not permit invisibility. He looked at the mirror for a long time. He laughed again. "Less dry this time." "All right," he said. "Hard mode it is." He walked to the small chest at the foot of the bed. He opened it. Inside, a folded uniform with a black and silver crest he recognized from his inherited memory. The Veilcourt Academy crest, a curved sword crossed with a moon. A small lacquered box with travel papers. A locket. 3 letters, sealed in black wax, addressed in his mother's hand. "For Kaelen, on the morning you depart." He sat down on the floor with the chest open. He read the letters. The first was the warning he already knew, written carefully, the way a parent writes a warning they have rehearsed for years. "You must never be examined. You must never sing. You must never bleed in front of an examiner. If anyone in the academy says the word anomaly in your presence, leave the room. Find a reason. Trip. Vomit. Anything." The second was a list of contacts. 3 names, 1 in the capital, 1 in the Western Harbor, 1 within the academy itself. These will help if you reach them in time. They will not help twice. The third was the one that broke him. The third was an apology. "We have hidden the truth from you for 17 years. We did not tell you because we did not want you to live afraid. We did not tell you because we did not, ourselves, want to live afraid. The world will tell you, in its own way, when the time comes, and you will hate us, and we are sorry. You are not what you were told you were. You were brought to us by a stranger on the night of the river flood. The stranger said you were the last. We did not believe her until we watched you grow. By your 4th year we knew. We have loved you as our own. We will love you as our own until we are bones. The world is going to be very hard for you. Be careful. Be cunning. Trust no one with the truth. We are sorry. We are sorry. We are sorry. Signed Mother, Father. Kaelen Vrast, the new one, the man wearing the boy, folded the letter very carefully. He put it back in the chest. He pressed his palms against his closed eyes for a count of 10. He did not cry. He had not earned the right to cry over these people. They had loved someone else. The person they had loved was no longer in this body. He owed them, at minimum, the work they had begun. He would survive the school. He would find a way to be strong. He would make the 17 years they had spent hiding him worth the hiding. He stood up. He stripped. He looked at his body in the mirror. Thin, but not weak. Long muscle. Healed scars along the forearm, along the ribs, along the back. Claw marks again. The body had been beaten as a child. Often. By something with claws. By his inherited memory supplied. The village's other hobgoblin children, who had known he was a runt and had not been gentle. His parents had moved him to this isolated mountain cabin when he was 8 specifically to stop the village from killing him. He bathed in the small basin. He shaved with a straight razor he found in the cabin's only drawer. He dressed in the Veilcourt uniform, black coat with silver piping, black trousers, white shirt, a black ribbon at the throat that the inherited memory told him marked him as a first-year incoming student. The uniform fit. It had been tailored by his mother. The thought sat in him for 1 second, and then he moved on. He packed the chest. He locked the cabin. He walked down the mountain path with the chest on his shoulder. The capital was 4 days' walk. The school began in 7. He had time to think. He thought. He thought about every survival rule he knew from his old life, every fiction he had ever read about going somewhere you did not belong, every con artist memoir, every spy biography. He thought about what monsters knew and did not know about humans. He searched the inherited memory. What the monsters knew about humans. Humans had been the dominant race 9 centuries ago. Humans had been killed in a coordinated extermination by the 7 monster races acting together. The extermination was called the Long Quieting. It was taught in monster schools as a correction. Humans had a unique trait, faith. If a human believed something with sufficient conviction, the world altered to match. Humans could, with enough belief, create gods, create laws, create new races, create new powers in others. The monster races, fearing what humans could shape them into, had killed every human alive. Humans had no innate magic, no core, no claws, no fangs, no anything. Just faith. Faith was the deadliest thing in the world. Faith was, the monster textbook said, the only weapon that had ever been able to defeat a god. What the monsters did not know about humans. Whether one was still alive. Kaelen walked down the mountain path with the chest on his shoulder and thought about faith. He did not, yet, know how to use it. He suspected he was going to have to figure it out fast. Part 1, Veilcourt. Chapter 1, The 3 at the Gate. Veilcourt Academy sat in a high valley on the western slope of the Crown Range. 3 black towers around a central keep. A long curtain wall of pale gray stone. A gate the size of a small house. The motto over the gate was carved in the old tongue and translated, roughly, as what walks in does not walk out unchanged. Kaelen Vrast walked under the gate at 6 in the morning on the day of intake. There were 3 people at the gate registry. 2 were the kind of intake clerks every school had, small, bored, in identical black robes. The 3rd was not. The 3rd was a girl about his age, with hair the color of fresh snow, eyes the color of pale wine, and the small, still face of someone who had been pretty her whole life and had stopped being interested in being told about it. She wore the senior year uniform. A silver pin shaped like a chalice marked her collar. The pin meant Vorin, first family of the vampire court, by the inherited memory. She was not waiting for him. She was waiting for someone behind him in line. She looked at him anyway. She looked at him with the small, focused attention of a predator deciding whether something was edible. He felt it. He did not flinch. He met her eyes for the count of one breath, gave her the small, polite nod a first year gave a senior, and looked past her at the registry clerk. She watched him until he reached the clerk's table. Name: Kaelen Vrast. Race: Hobgoblin. Tier: Runt. The clerk wrote without looking up. The other clerk, across the table, glanced at him, glanced at his clean-jawed face, glanced at the pretty senior watching from the side, and made a small private internal note that the senior had marked him. Form test in the south yard at 10, the first clerk said. Don't be late. Next. He bowed slightly. He shouldered his chest. He walked through the gate. The girl with the snow hair watched him until he turned the first corner. Then she turned back to her line. Her expression had not changed. Inside her, something small and unfamiliar had moved. She had been at this academy 4 years. She had seen 10,000 first-years walk under that gate. She had never seen one whose blood she could not smell. Not couldn't smell strongly. Couldn't smell at all. She had 2 options. Walk it back as a courtesy of the wind. Ignore it, file it, or pursue. She filed it. She would, by lunch, have walked it back to pursue. Chapter 2. The Test. The form test in the south yard at 10 was the academy's mandatory intake screen. Each first year stood in front of an obsidian disc the size of a dinner plate. The disc read the core. The disc read the species. The disc read the tier. The disc reported the 3 readings to the proctor in black ink across its own surface. The disc had been in service for 4 centuries. It had not, in those 4 centuries, returned a false reading. Kaelen stood in line on the south yard at 9:50 in the morning. There were 42 first years on the yard. They were every shape and size. A tall purple-skinned Oni boy 3 places ahead. Twin sisters who looked like ordinary humans but had eyes that flickered to slitted in the morning sun. Lamia, by the inherited memory. A small round boy who was almost certainly a slime in compressed form. A dark-haired girl with 3 small foxfires hovering behind her left ear. Kitsune, 3rd tier, by his memory. 42 future monsters. 1 actual human. The line moved fast. Each test took 12 seconds. The disc lit. The disc wrote. The proctor called the result. Next. Kaelen had been thinking about the disc for 4 days. He had asked the inherited memory every possible question about it. The disc read the core. The disc did not, in any record his parents had left, know what to do with the absence of a core. The most plausible failure mode, by the memory's best guess, was the disc reports no result, a blank surface. A blank surface would mean a malfunction, on the proctor's likely assumption, and the proctor would test again. A second blank result would mean the disc had failed. The proctor would, on protocol, send him to the school's master archivist for a manual examination. The manual examination would kill him. He had to give the disc something to read. He had spent 4 days working out how. He had nothing. He was not a monster. He had no core, no fong, no scale, no claw. His only resource was faith. He had spent 4 days learning that faith, in this world, did not require belief on the level of religion. Faith required certainty. Faith required the speaker to know, in his bones, that the thing he was about to assert was true. Then the world bent to make it true. He could not, in the next 6 minutes, become certain he had a hobgoblin core. He could not lie his way into one. But he could be certain about a different thing. He could be certain about the disc being broken. He could, with enough certainty, make the disc be the kind of broken that returned a confused reading. Hobgoblin core, low tier, suppressed. He had been rehearsing the certainty for 4 days. He had been rehearsing it the way an actor rehearsed lines until the lines came out of the actor in the voice of the character. The line moved. The boy in front of him, a tall, lean, dark-feathered harpy blood, stepped to the disc. The disc lit yellow. Harpy mid-tier. The boy bowed. He walked off. Kaelen stepped to the disc. The proctor, a tall, lean man with the gray skin of a wraithblood, eyes the color of slate, did not look up. Hand on the disc. Breathe out. Hold still. Kaelen set his right hand on the disc. The disc was cold. Inside his ribs, the absence where a core should have been opened like a small door. He thought, with all the certainty he had built across 4 days. The disc has a hairline crack at the edge from the cold last winter that no one ever noticed. The crack distorts the read of low-tier cores. The reading will come up suppressed. He thought it the way he would have thought the sun rose this morning. The disc lit yellow. The ink that rode across the surface said, in a slightly wavering hand, Hobgoblin. Runtier. Suppressed reading. Disc maintenance recommended. The proctor read it. He looked up at Kaelen. He looked back at the disc. He tapped the disc twice with the back of his pen. He frowned. Vrast. Step off. You. Next. Kaelen stepped off. He walked to the side of the yard. His knees were shaking. He kept his face calm. He stood at the rail. He breathed out slowly through his nose, the count of 7. Across the yard, on the upper observation gallery, a stone balcony that the senior students were permitted to watch from, Sylvine Vorin, the snow-haired vampire heiress from the gate, was watching. She had watched every test of the morning. She had been watching for one specific test. She had watched the disc light yellow for Kaelen Vrast. She had read the words on the disc. She had also read, in the same half-second, the precise small flicker of color at the disc's edge that the proctor had not seen, because the proctor had been looking at the writing and not at the disc. The flicker had been white. White, in the disc's language, was the color it returned when it was being told what to say. Sylvine Vorin had never seen a disc lie before. She had heard, in a children's story her father told her once when she was 4, that the disc could lie if the person being tested was a creature of faith. There was only one such creature. She had been told the species was extinct. Apparently, she thought, with the small, still face of a vampire heiress who had just been handed the only interesting problem of her senior year, the species was not. She turned. She walked off the gallery. She had work to do. Chapter 3. Sylvine Vorin. She came to his room at 9 in the evening. His room was a small single in the freshman tower's 3rd floor. Stone walls. Narrow window. A bed, a writing desk, a chair, a wardrobe. He had been sitting at the desk reading the Academy's first-year ethics primer when she knocked. The knock was light. 2 precise taps. He opened the door 6 inches. She stood in the corridor in her senior uniform with both hands behind her back. She looked at him without expression. Walk with me. He did not move. I do not know you, senior. I am required to be in my room after curfew. Walking with a senior outside the dormitory is a violation. It is. You will violate it. Walk with me, Kaelen Vrast. If I refuse, then I will, in the morning, write a report on the South Yard disk's malfunction during your test. The report will be filed with the master archivist. The archivist will examine the disk. The archivist will find no malfunction. The archivist will then examine you. You will, by the end of the examination, have stopped existing. I am offering you the alternative. He looked at her. She held his eyes. She did not blink. Her hands stayed behind her back. He believed her. He stepped into the corridor. He closed the door. He bowed slightly. Where are we walking, senior? To the moon garden. It is empty after 9. We will be alone. You will not, when we arrive, attempt to harm me. You will not, in particular, attempt to flee. If you attempt either, I will be 12 feet ahead of you before you complete the motion. I am being polite. Do not waste it. Understood. He walked. She walked beside him. She did not speak in the corridor. She did not speak on the stairs. She did not speak across the curtain wall walk that connected the freshman tower to the moon garden. The garden was a small enclosed courtyard with pale stone benches and a single black willow at its center. The willow's leaves trembled in the wind. The moon was 3/4. She stopped at the willow. She turned. She faced him. She said, "You are human." He did not answer. "You are not going to deny it. I will be irritated if you deny it." The disc lit white at the edge. You did not see it. I did. I am the only one who saw it. I have known what white at the edge means since I was 4. I have, since this morning, not slept. I have spent the day reading every book in the senior library on faith. There are 7. They have not, between them, told me anything that has resolved the question of what I am supposed to do with you. I have decided to ask you directly. You have decided what? Whether you are worth the alternative. A long pause. He looked at her in the moonlight. She was, the inherited memory supplied, the youngest daughter of the Voran clan. The Voran clan ran the vampire court. The vampire court was one of the 7 monster races that had killed his species. Her great-great-grandmother had personally killed 17 humans in the long quieting. Sylvain Voran was, by every reasonable calculation, the most dangerous person he had spoken to in his life. He thought for a count of 3. He decided to be honest. He decided to be honest because he had no other useful options. He had 4 days of training in faith. He could lie to a disc. He could not lie to a vampire heiress whose family's hunting tradition was based on detecting lies in a heartbeat. Yes, he said. I am human. She let out a breath she had been holding all day. Thank you for not insulting me. What do you want, Senior? I want a great many things. The first of them is to understand what I am looking at. The second is to decide what to do with you. I will, before I decide, tell you the framework. You will listen. You will, when I am done, say one sentence in reply. The sentence will tell me what to do. Go on. Option 1. I kill you tonight. I drain you fully. I take the residue to my father. He, in turn, takes it to the court. The Voran clan ascends 3 ranks for having ended the last human. I become heir presumptive of the court. This is the option most members of my family would, on receiving this information, select. I find myself not interested in this option. Why? Hush. Option 2. I report you. The Academy informs the court. The court informs the other 6 races. They send a coordinated unit. You are killed by the unit on the school grounds. The school is honored. I am thanked. The clan ascends 1 rank. I am also not interested in this option. Why? Hush. Option 3. I do nothing. I tell no one. I pretend not to have seen what I saw. You go on at the Academy as a runt hobgoblin. You will, almost certainly, be found out within 3 years by someone less perceptive than me, but more thorough than the proctor. You will die? I will have wasted the opportunity. I am also not interested in this option. Understood. Option 4. I keep you. Not as a possession. As an asset. I become your patron. I cover your tracks. I teach you how to survive. I introduce you, on my own choice, to the small number of seniors at this academy who can be trusted to know what you are without selling you to the court. I do this in exchange for one thing. The thing is, at this point in time, I will not name it. I have not yet decided what the thing is. When I have decided, I will tell you. You will, when I tell you, have the right to refuse. If you refuse, we reset to option 1. If you accept, the terms are binding. Do you understand? He looked at her. He looked at her for a long time. Senior, may I ask one question first? Yes. Why are you offering me option 4? She was silent for several seconds. She said, finally, in a voice he had not heard her use yet, quieter, less practiced. Because I have been bored for 4 years. Because my great-great-grandmother killed 17 humans in the quieting, and I have read her letters, and I do not, in the small honest space behind my teeth, think she was a good woman. Because if my court still kills humans on instinct, then my court is not the court I want to inherit. Because, Kaelen Vrast, when you stepped under the gate this morning, you held my eye for 1 breath. You did not look away the way prey looks away. You did not stare the way fools stare. You looked at me the way one person looks at another in the half-second before they decide whether the other is worth the conversation. I have not been looked at that way in 4 years. I would like to know what kind of human looks at a vampire that way. I would also like, in the next year, to find out whether the kind of human who looks at a vampire that way can be persuaded to help me change the court I am going to inherit. That is the offer. He looked at her. He said, "Accepted." She blinked. "You have not asked the price. You said you will name it when you have decided. I trust you to name something fair. If you do not, I will refuse. The alternative is option 1 tonight. I am not interested in option 1 tonight either." She looked at him for a long count. Then she smiled. It was a small smile. It did not show her fangs. He registered, with the distant clarity of a man who had been in this body 4 days, that he had not seen her smile before, and that the smile was a thing. "We have a bargain. Walk back. Sleep. Tomorrow morning, after breakfast, meet me in the senior library, 2nd floor, 3rd alcove from the east window. I will teach you what humans are supposed to know about faith and have not, by your inherited memory, been told. We will begin work." He bowed. "Thank you, Senior." "Sylvain, when we are alone." Senior is for the corridor. Sylvain. He walked back to the freshman tower. On the willow behind him, a small leaf trembled, not from the wind, but from the imperceptibly slowed breath of a vampire heiress who had not, in 21 years, made a decision she could not undo. She had just made one. She walked to her own quarters. She did not sleep that night either. Chapter 4. The First Miracle. He performed his first miracle on Wednesday. The miracle was for the boys' dormitory of the freshman tower, who had decided, by Wednesday morning, that the runt hobgoblin from the cabin in the mountains was the easiest practice target their floor had been given this year. Their floor's 3 apex bullies were Brask Volstein, 2nd-tier Trollblood, large, slow, mean. Ayas Comer, Kobold mid-tier, quick, mean, and aware of being quick. Peldravon, Harpy mid-tier, in his cousin's pocket, mean by association. They cornered Kaelen at the wash basin on the 3rd morning, with the casual confidence of 3 boys who had spent their preparatory years winning every fight they had ever picked. Brask shoved him into the basin. The basin's lip cut his shoulder. Ayas laughed. Pell laughed. Brask said the 4 standard things bullies always said in this kind of corner: runt, hobgoblin, mistake, cabin, and reached for the front of his shirt to pull him up for a punch. Kaelen did not block. He did not duck. He did not run. He held still. He held still because, the previous evening in the senior library's 3rd alcove from the east window, Sylvain Vorin had taught him the 2nd principle of faith. The first principle, she had said, is certainty. The 2nd principle is theater. Faith is louder when there is an audience. The audience does not have to believe yet. The audience has to see something they did not expect. The unexpected thing, if it is delivered with the certainty of the first principle, sticks in the audience's belief. Their belief feeds yours. Your faith grows. He had spent the previous evening planning. The basin in the boys' washroom of the freshman tower had a small enchanted water spout that the academy's plumbing staff had installed in the year before he was born. The spout was a low-tier elemental, bound by a small rune plate at its base. The rune plate, by Kaelen's inherited memory, his mother had been a low-grade plumbing rune scribe in her youth, was the sort of plate that was set to respond to verbal commands in the Old Tongue. The Old Tongue was taught in the Academy's 3rd-year curriculum. The first years did not know it. Kaelen Vrast, late of a 4th-floor walk-up apartment in a world with internet, had, in his old life, spent 2 years studying the Old Tongue of this world in a fan-fiction translation forum he had stumbled across at 16, run by hobbyists who were, in honest fact, dedicated linguists with too much time. He knew the Old Tongue. He had not, until 2 nights ago, known he was going to need it. He had practiced the command 300 times the previous night under his blanket. When Brask's fist closed on the front of his shirt, Kaelen, very quietly, in the Old Tongue, said the 7 syllables that the rune plate was set to respond to. The 7 syllables meant, in the Old Tongue, rise 3 handspans, hold, return on my 2nd word. The waterspout rose. A pillar of water, clean, clear, the diameter of a man's wrist, rose out of the basin and stood 3 feet above the rim. The pillar held. It did not splash. It hung in the air like a thing made of glass. The 3 boys froze. Kaelen, with the basin's lip still cutting his shoulder and Vrask's fist still on his shirt, turned his head slowly toward the pillar. He raised his free hand. He said, in the boy's standard tongue, in the small, precise voice of a runt hobgoblin who had just performed something his 3 apex bullies did not understand. Vrask, let go of my shirt. Vrask did not let go. Vrask was too slow. Ayas, who was quick, was already letting go of his own bracing posture and stepping back, because Ayas had the small, alert instinct of a kobold, and the kobold was, at this exact moment, reporting this as not a runt hobgoblin. Kaelen turned his palm toward the pillar. He said, in the old tongue, the second word, return. The pillar of water came down. It did not come down into the basin. It came down on Vrask. It came down on Vrask because Kaelen had, in his planning the previous night, decided that the second word, which the rune plate would interpret as return in the direction of the speaker's open palm, could be redirected by the orientation of his hand. The hand had been pointed at Vrask. The water had gone where the hand pointed. 3 gallons of cold mountain water came down on Vrask's head in 1 second. Vrask sputtered. Vrask's grip slackened. Vrask stepped back. Kaelen stepped out of the basin. He did not run. He stood at the edge of the washroom with his shoulder bleeding and his uniform's collar damp, and he looked at the 3 bullies with the calm, dry expression of a runt hobgoblin who had just commanded the washroom's plumbing in front of them. He said, in the boy's standard tongue, Vrask, Ayas, Pell, I am a runt hobgoblin. I have no offensive core. I do, however, talk to water. I have been talking to water since I was 9. The water in this tower does not, on the whole, like the 3 of you. If you would like, I can demonstrate again. The next demonstration will not be water. It will be the small ash fire elemental that lives in the freshman tower's basement furnace. The ash fire elemental is, on my count, the 7th thing in this tower that I am on speaking terms with. The other 6 are also opinionated. Would you like to find out which of them speaks to me about you tonight? Vrask, wet, cold, ego shaken, looked at him with the wide, stupid eyes of a troll blood who had been outmaneuvered by something he did not know how to categorize. You didn't. I did. Walk away, Vrask. Walk away, all 3. I am asking. Walk away. The next time I will not ask. They walked away. He stood at the edge of the washroom for a long count after they were gone. He breathed. He had, in his ribs, the small new warmth he had been told would arrive, the first ember of faith. 3 boys had witnessed something they had not expected. 3 boys had, in the same instant, believed something about him that was not, by the world's strictest standards, true. 3 boys had spent their belief into him. The warmth in his ribs sat where a hobgoblin core would have sat. It was small. It was real. It was a beginning. He cleaned the cut on his shoulder. He left the washroom. He walked to breakfast with his collar still damp. In the corridor, 3 doors down, a slim figure leaning against the wall with her arms folded, Sylvine Voren, who had taken the long way to the senior dining hall specifically to pass the freshman washroom at the hour she knew Vrask was due to corner him, gave Kaelen the smallest tilt of her chin. He gave her the smallest tilt back. By Thursday morning, the rumor on the freshman floor was that the runt hobgoblin Kaelen Vrast had been hiding a water affinity awakening that his cabin-poor childhood had simply prevented him from triggering. The rumor was useful. Kaelen did nothing to correct it. By Friday, half the freshman class believed it. By Sunday, the warmth in his ribs was, by his quiet sense, the size of a marble. Sylvine, in the 3rd alcove of the senior library on Sunday evening, listened to him describe the warmth's growth and gave him the 3rd principle of faith. The 3rd principle, she said, is the long game. You will, every day from now, do one small thing that one small audience does not expect. You will not, ever, do a large thing that a large audience expects. The large audience belongs to the great houses. They will, eventually look for you. By the time they look, you will have built belief in too many small audiences for any single house to take. That is your survival. That is also your power. Do you understand? He understood. He went to breakfast. Chapter 5. Veilcourt. Veilcourt was the cohort's loudest werewolf. She was a Year 1 transfer from the northern packs, a tall, suntanned girl with a long copper braid down her back, a missing front tooth that she refused to fix because it had been knocked out by her grandmother on her 12th birthday, and she considered it an heirloom, and the broad, easy grin of a girl who had spent her childhood running through forests under the moon. She was an alpha blood, second tier, with the speed of a full alpha and the strength of a half-grown wolf. Her core was, on the Academy's disc read, third in the year cohort. She had been at the Academy 2 months when she decided to investigate the rumor of the water affinity hobgoblin. She decided to investigate because, on a Monday afternoon in the second week of October, she walked past the south yard and smelled, very faintly, the smell of human drifting on the wind from the freshman tower's third-floor washroom. She knew the smell. She knew the smell because her grandmother had, on her 10th birthday, taken her to a private chamber under the Alpha House and showed her the preserved tongue of the last human her grandmother's grandmother had personally killed. The tongue had been kept in a stoppered jar in fluid for 200 years. The tongue had smelled, faintly, of a thing that no other race smelled like. Her grandmother had told her, "You will smell this once in your life, perhaps. If you do, you will tell me. You will tell no one else. We will, together, decide what to do." Veilcourt had walked past the freshman tower on a Monday in October and smelled the tongue. She had not told her grandmother yet. She had walked, instead, to her dormitory. She had thought for 2 days. She had decided, on the morning of the 3rd day, that the smell from the freshman tower had been very faint, that it had been drifting from the 3rd floor, where a single first-year boy lived who had recently been reported to have an unusual affinity for water, and that she was going to investigate. She found him in the Academy's outdoor track on a Thursday morning before sunrise. He ran the track every morning at 5:30. She had, by her wolf-trained nose, traced his route on 3 consecutive days. She was waiting at the 3rd lap marker. He saw her at 30 meters out. He did not break stride. She fell in beside him. She did not introduce herself. She did not ask his name. She ran with him for half a lap in silence. Then she said, in the easy, bright voice of a girl who had been raised by wolves, "You smell weird." He kept running. He said, between breaths, "Weird. Weird. Not bad. Weird. I am a wolf. I have a wolf nose. I have smelled hobgoblins my whole life. You do not smell like a hobgoblin. I am a runt. Runts smell like hobgoblins. You smell like," she paused. "I do not know what you smell like." A long silence. 2 laps of the track went by under them. The pre-dawn was cold. Their breath was steam. The east horizon was beginning to lighten. He decided. He decided because, on a quiet calibration he had been making for 2 days since the water spout, he had concluded that he was going to need allies inside the cohort, not just among the seniors. He had concluded that the first cohort ally was going to be a wolf, because wolves, by the inherited memory and by his independent reading, had a strong tradition of personal loyalty that, once given, did not break under family pressure. He had been looking for the right wolf. He had not, until this morning, known there was one whose nose was sharp enough to come find him first. He stopped running. She stopped 2 strides past him. She turned. He looked at her. "Veilcourt. You know my name? I have read the cohort roster. I read it the first day. Veilcourt. Northern Pack. Alpha Blood. 2nd tier. 3rd in the cohort by disc read. Missing front tooth. Kept on purpose." She grinned. The grin showed the gap. "Kept on purpose. Heirloom. What is your name?" "Kaelen Vrast. I have not read the roster. I do not read rosters." "Kaelen Vrast. You do not smell like a hobgoblin. Why do you not smell like a hobgoblin?" He breathed in once. He breathed out. He said, very quietly, in a voice the empty track could not carry. Because I am not a hobgoblin. I am a human. I am the only one. If you tell anyone, my life is over. I am telling you, now, because you have already smelled what you smelled, and you are going to tell someone if I do not give you a reason not to. The reason I am giving you is the truth. I would like, if you can stand it, to have a friend in this cohort. I do not have any friends here. I have a patron. The patron is a senior. The patron is not a friend. I would like a friend. If you would like to be one, I will trust you with my life every morning at 5:30 on this track. If you would not like to be one, walk to your alpha aunt today and tell her what you smelled. I will not be at the school by Sunday. I will not blame you. I will, in honest fact, have expected it. Which would you like? She stared at him. She stared at him with the wide, bright eyes of a girl who had run for half a lap beside a boy and had not, until this moment, registered exactly how cold the morning was. She tilted her head. Wolves did that. She thought. She thought about her grandmother's chamber and the stopper jar. She thought about how, even at 10 years old, she had not particularly wanted to be in the chamber. She thought about the small surprise of a runt hobgoblin who had, 2 laps earlier, met her bright, easy question with a clean, honest answer. She had not, in 17 years, been answered like that. She thought, I am supposed to be the alpha. The alpha decides. The alpha decides for the pack. I am 2 months from my pack. I am, in this morning, on a track, alone with a boy who has just trusted me with his life. The alpha decides. I am the alpha. I am deciding. She stuck out her hand. Friend, she said. He took her hand. Her hand was warm. The grip was firm. She did not, in the handshake, transmit any of the small tells he had been warned about. The wolf was not preparing to attack. The wolf was, in honest fact, beaming. She shook his hand. She let go. 5:30, she said. Tomorrow. I will be here. We will run. We will not, in honest fact, talk about the human thing again unless you want to. If we do, we will talk about it on the track, in the cold, with nobody else. You will tell me what you need. I will be a friend in the cohort. I will, in particular, beat up anybody on this floor who tries to bother you, because that is what a wolf friend is for. Will you let me do the beating up? Within reason. Yes. Within reason. He laughed. She bared her teeth in the grin again, the grin with the gap. She slugged him on the shoulder. He took the slug. He kept his footing. She turned. She ran the last lap of the track without him. He watched her go for a moment. Then he ran the last lap on his own pace. The warmth in his ribs, at the end of the lap, was the size of a small plum. Chapter 6. The Library Senior. Sylvine introduced him to the second senior on Saturday evening. The second senior was waiting in the third alcove of the library when Kaelen and Sylvine arrived at 8. She was, in posture, almost the opposite of Sylvine, slumped in the alcove's reading chair, legs crossed at the knee, a book open on her lap, a small porcelain cup of black tea balanced on the chair's arm. Her hair was the color of dried autumn grass. Her eyes were the deep amber that, in this world, by the inherited memory, marked a kitsune. The kitsune did not stand when they entered. She did not look up from the book. She said, in a soft, amused voice, Sylvine, is this the human? This is the human. Vrast. Senior. Ymirii. We are alone in the alcove. The wards are mine. Drop the senior. Drop Ymirii in any corridor outside this room. I do not exist to you in the corridors. I do exist to you here. Sit. He sat. Ymirii marked her page. She closed the book. She set it on the arm of the chair next to the teacup. She looked at him for a long count of 3, the way a kitsune of the upper clans looked at a stranger, eyes half-lidded, the small precise focus of a fox spirit deciding whether the rabbit was interesting. She said, Sylvine tells me you are the last human. Sylvine tells me you have begun to develop faith in the 3rd week of the academic year. Sylvine tells me you have, by her own assessment, the most promising survival instinct she has seen in a first year in 4 years. Sylvine has not, in 4 years, said anything that positive about another student. I am, therefore, willing to be your second patron in this academy, on terms similar to Sylvine's. The terms are, I will teach you the Kitsune art of deception, which is the longest developed deception tradition in this world, and which will be useful to you for the rest of your life. I will, in exchange, ask you, at a future point, for one favor. I have not yet decided the favor. I will decide when I have decided. You will, when I decide, have the right to refuse. If you refuse, we reset to the option Sylvine calls option 1. Do you accept? He looked at her. He looked at Sylvine. Sylvine gave him the smallest nod. He looked back at Yamiria. Accepted. She smiled. The smile was, like the kitsune itself, the kind of smile that had layers. Good. Lesson 1. The first thing a kitsune teaches her apprentice is that the apprentice is not, in any meaningful sense, learning a new skill. The apprentice is unlearning the habit of believing the world. Vrast. Listen. The world is a story that people are telling each other. Each story has gaps. The gaps are where you live. Sylvine's faith principle is the part of the story you tell. The kitsune principle is the part of the story you let other people tell, that you then write. You do not need to lie. You only need to let people complete sentences in their own heads in the direction that is useful to you. They will complete it. They always do. Your job, as the kitsune apprentice, is to make sure the sentences they start are sentences whose endings work in your favor. Do you understand? He thought about it for a moment. You mean that I should manipulate the priors? She blinked. She had not, in honest fact, been expecting that word. Priors. That is a word from where you came from, I think. I came from a world that had statistics. The kitsune call it the seed bowl principle. The translation is good. Yes. You manipulate the seeds people are already carrying. You do not, in particular, plant new seeds. New seeds are expensive. They take faith. The seed bowl is, for a kitsune, free. People carry too many seeds. You pick the one they were going to plant anyway, and you make sure it grows the way you want. Example. You. This morning. On the track. With the wolf. You know about that. I know about everything that happened on the track this morning between 5:30 and 6. The wolf came to you because she had smelled you. You did not, on the track, lie to her. You told her you were human. You told her the truth because the wolf had already decided, before approaching you, that she was going to consider the truth. The decision had been seeded by her grandmother's chamber and by her own discomfort with that chamber. You picked the seed and let it grow. The wolf is now your friend. The wolf will, in the next 4 years, beat up between 11 and 14 people on your behalf. You did not plant the seed. You read it. That is the kitsune principle. Do you see? I see. Good. Now, for the rest of this lesson, you will tell me 5 seeds you have already read this week. Begin. He told her 5. He told her the seed in Vrast's belief that water was Kaelen's affinity. He told her the seed in Sylvine's family inheritance of vampire court politics. He told her the seed in the proctor's preference for the easy explanation. He told her the seed in his own dormitory floor's preference for a cohort hierarchy that did not have to do further thinking. He told her the seed in Viola's discomfort with her grandmother. Yamiria listened. At the end, she nodded once. You are a natural. That is annoying. Sylvine, you have brought me an annoying apprentice. I have. I will keep him. She picked the book back up. She crossed her legs the other way. She looked at Kaelen. Tomorrow night. Same alcove. Bring a question. The question will be your homework for the week. I will, in honest fact, answer it. The answer will require you to do something difficult by Wednesday. I look forward to it. Tomorrow. She turned the page. She did not look up again. Sylvine rose. Kaelen rose. They left the alcove. In the corridor outside the library, Sylvine said quietly, She will, in time, ask the favor before I do. She is, as a kitsune, faster than me at deciding what she wants. Do not be alarmed when she asks. Do not, in particular, take what she asks personally. The kitsune ask in the form of small inconveniences. The inconvenience is always less than what it appears to be. The inconvenience is, in honest fact, always a test. You will pass if you assume it is a test. Understood. Kaelen. Yes. 6 weeks ago, I asked myself whether I was going to be a vampire heiress who would, by 25, have killed 17 humans on the way to the throne of my court. I had not, at the time, expected to encounter a human. I had encountered, 2 days later, you. The arithmetic was illustrative. I have not decided, in the 6 weeks, that I am not going to be the vampire heiress who will inherit the throne. I have decided that the throne is going to be a different throne. I am telling you this so that you understand. The favor I will, one day, ask of you, is going to be a favor that contributes to the change of the throne. The favor will be large. I am preparing you. I will not ask for years. By the time I ask, you will be ready. The years between are the years in which I will teach you everything I know about how vampires think, including the parts of the Vorin clan that I would, in honest fact, prefer to forget. Will you take the lessons? I will. Good. She walked away into the dark of the corridor. He stood alone for a moment in the library entrance. He thought, 1 wolf, 1 vampire, 1 kitsune. 3 weeks. The warmth in my ribs is the size of a plum. The long quieting will, by my count, take 10 more years to undo, if it can be undone. I have 10 more years. He walked back to his dormitory. The warmth in his ribs, on the walk, was warm. Chapter 7. Lyrian Vasker. The dragon blood transferred in on the first day of October. She arrived in the senior class. She was 19, a year ahead of her age cohort, a foreign transfer from the eastern wing of the Dragon Courts. Her name was on the Academy's board in the morning bulletin in gold letters because Vasker was a great house, and the board's secretary had decided, on her own initiative, to honor the arrival by changing the ink. The morning bulletin caused, in 3 minutes, every senior at Veilcourt to stop what they were doing. Lyrian Vasker was the second daughter of the Eastern Vasker Dragon Court. She had, by the inherited memory and by the morning bulletin's footnote, manifested her dragon form at 11, 3 years before the average, and had, at 14, killed a rogue griffin blood in her own court's pit. She was, by every plausible measure, the most powerful student at the academy for the next 2 years. She entered the senior dining hall at lunchtime on the first day. The dining hall fell quiet. She was a head taller than most of the seniors. Her hair was the color of beaten gold. Her eyes were vertical slit reptilian gold under heavy lids. She wore the senior uniform. The Vasker crest at her collar was inlaid with 3 small fire rubies, 1 for each dragon ancestor. She crossed the hall to the senior table. She sat at the head of the table, not by formal protocol. The table did not have a formal head, but by walking to the chair at the head and pulling it out and sitting in it. The seniors who had been seated nearby moved their chairs slightly. They did not, in any way, suggest that the chair was not hers. Sylvain Vorin, at the other end of the senior table, did not move at all. Lyrian Vasker, sitting at the head of the table, looked across at Sylvain Vorin and inclined her head 1/4 of an inch. Sylvain Vorin, at the other end, inclined her head 1/4 of an inch back. The hall registered the exchange. The hall did not understand it. The hall would understand it within a week. The Vorin clan and the Vasker court had been quietly at odds for 60 years over a trade dispute about blood silver mines on the southern coast. Lyrian ate. She ate without speaking. She read a small book during the meal. The book was in Old Draconic. When she left the hall, she walked past the freshman tables on the way out, the way new seniors sometimes did to measure the year's cohort. She paused, for half a step, at the bench where Kaelen Vrast was eating with Viola Drogan, who had been ignoring the cohort's protocol about freshman seating and had been eating at his bench every meal for 2 weeks. Lyrian Vasker looked at Kaelen Vrast. Kaelen Vrast did not look up. He had, on Sylvain's instruction the previous week, perfected the art of not looking up at seniors during their cross-hall walks. He continued not looking up. He kept eating. Leary and Vasker, who had been raised to recognize the small, precise hesitations of fearful prey, registered that the runt hobgoblin at the freshman bench did not hesitate. He did not fear. He kept eating with the ordinary rhythm of a boy who did not care that a dragon blood was 3 feet from him. She did not know him. She had not heard of him. She paused for half a step longer. She walked on. In the corridor outside the dining hall, 10 minutes later, she met one of her cohort seniors, a Kraken blood named Drawn, an old acquaintance of her court, and asked, in the easy, distracted tone of a senior asking a senior about the year's gossip, who was the runt hobgoblin at the third bench in the freshman section. Drawn told her. She filed the name. That evening, in her own quarters in the senior tower, she sat at the desk with a small ledger and wrote, in Old Draconic, in the lower left corner of the second page, Kaelen Vrast. Runt-tier hobgoblin. Did not fear me at the bench. Investigate. She closed the ledger. She did not, that night, do anything about it. She had 4 years at this academy. She had time. Chapter 8. The Test in the Forest. The cohort's first practical exam was in the 3rd week of October. It was held in the academy's training forest, 3 square kilometers of old-growth pine on the western slope, walled in by a half-meter-high ward stone every 50 paces. The 42 first years would be deployed in single-pilot tracking and survival assessments, by lottery, against academy-trained tracking beasts, a mid-tier wood spirit hound, a pair of low-tier shade beasts, and a single high-tier glass mantis that the cohort had been warned about but had never seen. The exam ran from dawn to dusk. The objective was simple: stay alive, find your own end-of-exam beacon at the southwest ward stone, light the beacon, and report. The lottery was rigged. It was rigged by an instructor named Master Brell, a Wraithblood tracker who, by Viola Drogan's quiet inquiry of her cohort's pre-academy roster, had a long-standing connection to the Volstein house of Brask the Bully. Brell had, in the 2nd week, accepted a small gift from the Volstein family. The gift was, in the cohort's polite phrasing, for the runt's encouragement. The encouragement was to assign Kaelen Vrast a tracking beast he could not, on any honest analysis, defeat. Kaelen Vrast drew the glass mantis. He knew before he drew it. He knew because, on the morning of the lottery, Sylvine had slipped him a small folded note at breakfast. The note read, Brell will set you with the high tier. Mantis. South Range. He's been paid. S. He read the note in his lap. He went to the lottery. He drew the glass mantis with the calm expression of a runt hobgoblin who had no idea what the lottery meant. The 42 first years lined up at the forest's east edge at dawn. The proctors called the assignments. Kaelen's name was called forth. The glass mantis was a name nobody else's parents had warned them about. Most of the cohort did not, in honest fact, know what a glass mantis was. Viola, 3 places down in the line, did. Her face did something. He caught it. He gave her the smallest negative shake of his head. She held still. The whistle blew. The cohort entered the forest. Kaelen walked east for the first kilometer, then turned south. He walked the South Range, because the South Range was where the mantis lived. He had spent 2 evenings in the senior library reading every book it had on glass mantises. There were 3 things he knew about glass mantises. 1. They were, by name, glass. Their carapace was a brittle silica composite that the Academy's lore office had, on the species' first capture 60 years ago, classified as frangible to localized thermal shock. Glass mantises broke if you got them hot, and then cold inside 2 seconds. 2. They hunted by reflective signal. They did not, in honest fact, see prey. They saw the prey's reflected light off the forest's surface dew. A still target with no movement on dew-wet ground was, to a glass mantis, invisible. A moving target was a small bright beacon. 3. They had a single weakness. The seam between the head and the thorax. The seam was glass. The seam, hit at right angles with sufficient force, shattered both head and thorax simultaneously. He had, in his pack, 3 things: a small earthen vial of vinegar, a small earthen vial of slaked lime, a loop of strong wire about the length of his forearm. He had brought no weapon larger than the wire. The mantis found him at 3 in the afternoon. It found him at the south edge of a small clearing where Kaelen had been deliberately, slowly, leaving a trail of dew disturbance for an hour. The trail led to the clearing. In the clearing was a small flat rock the size of a chair. On the rock, Kaelen had set his pack open with one of the earthen vials inside, the slaked lime, and an apparent stumble pattern in the wet leaves around the rock that suggested he had fallen, dropped the pack, and panicked. Kaelen was, in honest fact, in a low branch of a pine tree directly above the rock, 12 feet up, in absolute stillness. The mantis entered the clearing. It was 4 meters long, mostly translucent, with the long blade arms its name promised. It moved silently across the wet leaves. Its head turned. It read the dew on the rock. It read the open pack. It read the stumble pattern. It read the small reflected lights on the open vial of lime and the small wet imprint of a boot. It approached the rock. Kaelen waited. He waited until the mantis was directly under his branch, its head over the rock, its thorax over the wet leaves, the seam at the back of its head exposed. He dropped the second vial. The second vial was the vinegar. It hit the slaked lime in the open pack on the rock. The two reacted with a small, loud, violent hiss. A column of warm fog rose. The fog, in the cool October afternoon, hit the cold air at the top of its column and condensed. The temperature differential at the rock's surface was, by his careful 7th-grade chemistry, sufficient to crack glass that had been resting in the cool ambient. The mantis's carapace, on its underside, where it had been over the rock, cracked. The mantis startled. The startle was, by glass mantis biology, a fast vertical jerk of the head and thorax. The motion was the worst possible motion for a creature whose head and thorax were now structurally compromised. The motion brought the head and thorax into the line of the second thing Kaelen had set up. The wire, which he had run between 2 pine branches at the precise height of a glass mantis's neck, taut, anchored on one end to a low branch and on the other end to the trunk of the tree he was sitting in. The mantis's neck hit the wire at speed. The wire, sharp, took the cracked seam at right angles. The mantis's head came off the thorax. The mantis fell. Kaelen waited in the branch for the count of 1 minute, in case the mantis was capable of reflex motion after decapitation. It was not. He climbed down. He stood beside the body. He looked at the pack, the rock, the wire, the body. He had killed a high-tier tracking beast at 15 meters of altitude in 3 seconds using 2 earthen vials and a loop of wire. He had not used faith. He had not, in any sense, used a hobgoblin core. He had used the school's chemistry prep lab, which the academy did not, in honest fact, expect first years to have read. He had read every book in the chemistry prep section in his first 10 evenings, before he had met Sylvie. The books had been very useful. He pulled the mantis's carapace off in 2 big sections. He folded the head into his pack. He cleaned the wire. He coiled it back at his hip. He left the body in the clearing. Master Brel would, on the body's discovery, have to explain why his high-tier tracking beast had died via a chemistry and wire trap, and would, in honest fact, file a quiet alarm with his patrons at the Wallstein house. Kaelen wanted the alarm filed. The alarm would tell the Wallstein house that the runt hobgoblin was, not what they had thought. He walked to the southwest toward Stone. He lit the beacon. He reported. He was, by the proctor's clock, the 3rd student to finish the exam. The second fastest had been Vaela Drogan, who had finished 40 minutes earlier. Vaela ran wolf form through the forest and had taken down her assigned shade beast in 11 minutes flat. The fastest, of course, had been a senior proctor's surprise insertion of the year's strongest first year, who had finished at lunchtime. The strongest first year was a girl Kaelen had not yet met. He saw her, for the first time, sitting on the bench at the Southwest Ward Stone when he arrived. She was, by appearance, a black-haired girl in the regulation uniform, slim, with eyes the color of polished obsidian and the small, loose calm of someone who had killed something earlier in the day and was, in honest fact, bored. She looked up at him. Vrast. Core. Tsubaki Karin. Oni blood, second tier. The cohort's first-ranked first year on the disc read. He sat down on the other end of the bench. He did not sit too close. She studied him for the count of 3 breaths. You have mantis dust on your hands. He looked at his hands. He did. The carapace fragments had, on his handling, left a fine, clear powder on his palms. I killed it. How? He considered. He decided, on a quiet calibration he had now made twice with 2 different girls in the cohort, to give her the kitsune version, the real seeds that her own priors would complete on their own. He said, vinegar, lime, and a wire. She looked at him. She tilted her head. Oni did that, too. Not the way wolves did, but the way Oni did, slow, considering, with a measuring eye. Vinegar, lime, and a wire. Yes. The mantis was a high tier. Yes. You are a runt hobgoblin. Yes. Vinegar, lime, and a wire are not, in honest fact, hobgoblin core abilities. They are not. You are, in honest fact, not relying on your core. I am not. My core is small. I have been told it is the smallest in the southern range. I have, in compensation, spent my reading time in the Academy's prep lab books. I do not have core fights. I have, when forced, applied chemistry fights. Today was an applied chemistry fight. I would, in honest fact, prefer not to discuss the details, because the details are the kind of details that, once shared, lose their advantage. She looked at him for a very long time. She nodded once. That is sensible. Vrast. I will not, in honest fact, ask for the details. I will, in honest fact, ask whether you would consider sitting at my table at dinner tonight. Your table. My table. I sit alone at the second bench, 3rd row from the entrance. I sit alone because I have been raised by my mother not to speak unless I have, in honest fact, something to say. I have, in honest fact, very rarely had something to say. I would like, tonight, to have something to say. The something is vinegar, lime, and a wire. Will you sit? I will sit. Good. She stood. She bowed to him. A small, precise Oni bow, the bow a warrior gave a peer. He stood. He bowed back. They walked, together, in silence, back to the academy. Viola Drogan, who had been sitting on a stump 20 meters away with a book in her lap, watched them walk. She did not say anything. She would, that evening, sit at Tsubaki Karin's table too. Tsubaki would not, in honest fact, object. Tsubaki had been raised by a mother who valued silence. Tsubaki had, on the bench at the Southwest Ward Stone, broken a 4-year personal silence with 2 boys, none, and 1 runt hobgoblin. The runt hobgoblin had been the right runt hobgoblin. Viola was Viola. The table was, by the end of dinner, 3. The warmth in Kaelen's ribs, by the end of dinner, was the size of a small fist. He went to bed at 10. He slept the heavy sleep of a man who had killed a mantis. In Sylvain Vorin's quarters, that evening, Sylvain was reading the proctor's report on the day's exam. The report's summary noted the mantis's body found in Clearing 17, dismembered without core magic residue, in a chemistry and wire trap that no first year had been trained to construct. The report's footnote, in Master Brell's handwriting, indicated that Master Brell had, on this evidence, filed an internal request for re-evaluation of Kaelen Vrast's intake screen. Sylvain closed the report. She walked to her writing desk. She wrote a single short note, sealed it, and called for her personal courier. The note went to Master Brell's quarters. The note read, Brell, the Vrast student is not to be re-evaluated. The re-evaluation is, by my private inquiry, unnecessary. I am, in my personal capacity, sponsoring his progression. Withdraw the request by morning. SV. She did not, in the note, threaten him. She did not need to. The Vorin clan, by treaty, held the Academy's funding ledger. The Vorin clan also held, as of 2 centuries ago, the personal debt of 3 of the Academy's 11 senior masters, including the master who served as the disciplinary authority over Master Brel. The note did not threaten. The note did not need to. By morning, the re-evaluation request had been withdrawn. By morning, the Volstein house had received a private letter from a contact inside the Vorin clan suggesting that the gift to Master Brel be, on quiet reflection, reconsidered. By mid-morning, Master Brel had been transferred to a different academy on the eastern coast. The cohort did not learn about the transfer for 3 weeks. By then, Kaelen had killed 2 more things. Chapter 9, Marlowe Vel. The succubus arrived in the 2nd week of November, off-cycle. On a special admit basis, the Academy granted twice a year to students whose home circumstances required midterm placement. Her name was Marlowe Vel. She was 17. She was tall, slim, with hair the color of dark wine and eyes the same. Her skin was a warm cream that, in the right light, hinted faintly at a pearl violet undertone, the only marker, in her human form, of her succubus inheritance. She wore the regulation uniform with the small alteration that the school permitted for her race, which was a slim silver chain at her throat with a stoppered glass vial on it the size of a thumb. The vial was full of her own thirst suppressant. Succubi at the Academy were, by the school's contract with the succubus matriarchs, required to wear the vial in public spaces at all times during their first year. Marlowe Vel arrived in the middle of homeroom on a Tuesday morning. She bowed to the homeroom teacher, introduced herself in 3 sentences, name, race, home district, and was assigned the empty seat directly behind Kaelen Vrast. She sat down. She did not, in honest fact, mean to be assigned the seat. The homeroom teacher had pointed at it because it was the only seat left. Marlowe had, in her preliminary briefing from the Academy's enrollment office the previous morning, been told that the cohort's roster had 1 runt hobgoblin in it. The runt hobgoblin had not been considered relevant to her admission. He was, in front of her now, by his coat collar. The coat collar was wrong. She did not, in honest fact, know what was wrong about it. Her succubus inheritance gave her a low-level passive read of any creature's emotional state and a small precise read of their desire pattern. The read was the Academy's main reason for requiring the vial. The school did not want untrained succubi accidentally sucking desires out of the hallways. Marlowe's read on the boy in front of her was a wall. She had read the coats of every student she had passed on the way to her seat. The reads had been ordinary. Fear of an upcoming exam. A small crush on a girl in another section. Hunger for breakfast. The ordinary noise of a teenage cohort. The coat in front of her, the runt hobgoblins, gave her nothing. Not silence. Nothing. The coat was not registering on the succubus read at all. She blinked. She had not, in 17 years, read a coat that was nothing. She leaned forward in her chair. She set her elbow on her desk. She turned her head a quarter inch. She looked at the small fragment of his profile visible past the corner of his collar. He was writing in his notebook. His hand was steady. His handwriting was small. She read his hand. Hands were, by her family's tradition, the last refuge of a soul that was hiding. The hand carried the rhythm of the heart. The rhythm of the heart, in any race in this world, gave away the emotional state when nothing else did. The hand in front of her had no rhythm, she recognized. The hand had a rhythm. The rhythm was there. The rhythm did not, in honest fact, correspond to any of the rhythms her family had ever catalogued. The catalog included 13 races, 407 hybrid blood patterns, 18 edge case rhythms, newborns, dying old, witches mid-spell, and 3 patterns marked unknown, see archive. The unknown patterns were, in the family archive, drawn in faded ink. They were labeled, In her gray-tant's careful hand. Humans, extinct. Marlo Vell, in the third row of first-year homeroom on a Tuesday morning, sat for the count of 3 breaths with her own hand frozen on her own desk, looking at the small, steady writing of a boy whose pulse matched a catalog entry her great-aunt had drawn from memory 3 centuries before her birth. She did not breathe. She thought. She thought for the rest of the period. She thought about her great-aunt. She thought about her family's politics. She thought about the small private fact, which she had never told anyone, that she had been, since the age of 9, deeply uncomfortable with her family's pro-quieting tradition. She had read the quieting records at 15. She had wept in her own room for 2 evenings. She had, the third evening, decided that the quieting had been a stain on her race that she did not, in her own person, want to add to. She had spent the past 2 years cultivating the small persona her family expected from her, the playful, flirty succubus who was good at parties and bad at lessons, specifically because she had decided, in the third evening of her weeping, that the safest path for her own private opinion was to be underestimated. She was, in the third row of homeroom, sitting behind the only thing her great-aunt's catalog had ever drawn in faded ink. The homeroom bell rang. She stood up. The other students stood up. The class moved. She moved with the class. Outside in the corridor she did not, in fact, walk to her next assigned class. She walked, instead, to the freshman tower's bulletin board, where the day's class assignments were posted. She found Kaelen Vrast's schedule. She memorized it. She walked to her own next class. In her own next class, she sat in the back row and stared at the wall for 40 minutes without taking a single note. At lunch, she did not go to the dining hall. She went, instead, to the third alcove of the senior library, which was, by every student's gossip in the cohort, occupied at lunch on Tuesdays by Sylvine Voren and her quiet protégés. She walked into the alcove. Sylvine was in the chair. Yumiri was in the other chair. Kaelen Vrast was on the small bench beside the reading table with a book open. Viola Drogan was leaning against the wall by the door, eating an apple. Marlo stopped at the alcove's entrance. She bowed precisely to Sylvine. Senior Voren. I am Marlo Vell. I transferred in this morning. I have, by a coincidence of the homeroom teacher's seating, ended up directly behind your protégé Kaelen Vrast. I have a question I would like to ask all of you. The question is, she stopped. She did not, in honest fact, know how to finish the sentence. She thought for a moment. She said, very quietly, the question is whether I may join the alcove. Sylvine looked at her. Yumiri looked at her. Viola looked at her. Kaelen looked at her. Sylvine said, in the same small, still voice she had used at the Willow on Kaelen's first night, what do you bring? Marlo, looking at the 4 faces, none of whom had, in honest fact, betrayed any expression, said, I bring the assurance that the boy on the bench is not a hobgoblin. I bring the further assurance that I am not going to tell my family. I bring the still further assurance that my family's archives, by my great-aunt's hand, have records of his species pulse pattern, which I have just read by accident in homeroom. I bring the offer of my family's archives, in exchange for the alcove's permission to be in this room. I will not, in any way, harm the boy. I will, in the same gesture, not particularly trust anyone who tries to. That is what I bring. A long silence. Sylvine tilted her head 1/4 inch. She said, sit. Marlo Vell. Marlo sat. Yumiri poured her a cup of tea. Yumiri's hand was steady. Marlo's hand, as she took the cup, was not. Kaelen Vrast set his book down. He looked at Marlo across the small alcove table. He said quietly, thank you. She blinked. She set down her tea. You have not asked me what I want. You said what you wanted. You said you wanted to be in the alcove. I have heard the request. The request is granted on Sylvine's word, which is the word of this alcove. I accept it. I will, in honest fact, also accept the offer of your family's archives if you can produce them. The pulse pattern catalog will save me 2 years of guessing about what my own body is doing. I am very grateful. Marlovel, what is your favor? She had not, in honest fact, prepared a favor. She thought. She said, slowly, The favor is that you will help me, in 3 years, when my mother attempts to formally betroth me to the Eastern Succubus Court's heir. I do not, in honest fact, want to marry him. I do not, in further fact, want to be a daughter of my mother's politics. I would like, 3 years from now, to have a reason to refuse the betrothal that my mother cannot, on her own court's politics, override. I have not, until 30 minutes ago, had any such reason. I am asking, now, that you, when the time comes, give me one. I will not, Vrast, I will not ask for marriage. I would never ask a creature of faith to marry me as a contractual matter. I am asking for the form of an attachment that my mother cannot, on her court's reading, override. The form will be, by my mother's reading, a serious attachment to a person of unrelated court. The form will be the truth, to whatever extent you and I are able to truth it into being in 3 years. That is the favor. Sylvine, who had been listening with the small, still face she usually wore, smiled. Kaelen looked at Marlowe for a long moment. He said, Accepted. Marlowe's eyes, the wine-dark eyes of a succubus, which had not, in her 17 years, wept in public, filled briefly. She did not, in honest fact, let the tears fall. Thank you. Don't thank me. The alcove keeps its bargains. Sit. Drink the tea. Tell us about the pulse pattern catalog. I am, in honest fact, very interested. She told them about the catalog. The alcove, by the end of the lunch period, was 5. Part 2. The long quieting hunts again. Chapter 10. The cult in the cellar. The first cellar Kaelen took was in the 2nd week of November. He took it because Sylvine's morning briefing, a small folded note slipped to him at breakfast, had named a wine merchant cellar 3 streets off the Academy district where a fringe cult called the Watchers of the Quiet met every Friday at midnight. The Watchers were not, by any measure, important. They were 40 middle-aged monsters who got together every week to drink poor wine and reaffirm to each other that humans had deserved the quieting. They were ridiculed by the great houses. The great houses paid for the wine. The Watchers had, however, in the past month, acquired a new member. The new member was Master Brel. Brel had not transferred to the eastern coast. Brel had been bought off the eastern coast by the Watchers within 3 weeks of his quiet removal. Brel had brought with him every observation he had filed on the cohort intake. Brel had, by Sylvine's intelligence, told the Watchers that the Academy was hosting at least one anomaly that the disc had failed to read properly. Brel had not named Kaelen. Brel was a careful man, but Brel had described. Sylvine's note read, Friday midnight. Storm Crow Wine Cellar. Brel will be there. They are going to discuss the anomaly. Kill Brel before he names you. Take whatever else needs taking. S. Kaelen read the note in his lap at breakfast. He folded it. He burned it in his tea. He spent the week preparing. He did not bring Viella. Viella's nose was a liability in a cellar full of monsters who might recognize a wolf scent. He did not bring Marlowe. Marlowe's succubus reed could give her away. He did not bring Eumerii, because Eumerii had a senior exam that night. He did not bring Sylvine, because Sylvine was the only person at the Academy whose disappearance from the senior tower for an evening would be noticed by every clan in the city. He brought Tsubaki Karin. He brought Tsubaki because, 3 nights before the Friday, he had walked into Tsubaki's quarters in the freshman tower at 9 in the evening, sat down at her small table, and said, I need to kill a man on Friday. The kill is going to be in a cellar with 40 witnesses. The 40 witnesses will need to die too. I can do 30 alone if you do the other 10. The 30 I do will be dirty. The 10 you do will be clean. We can save 4 hours that way. I am asking you because you are the only person in the cohort with both the strength and the discretion. Will you come? She had looked at him for half a minute. She had said, yes. She had not, in her ancestral history, ever killed a man. Oni did not, by tradition, take life lightly. Tsubaki, however, had been raised by a mother who valued silence and a father who had been killed at 15 in a Watcher mob in her home district. The Watchers had killed her father because they had suspected him of harboring a half-blood Lamia in the upstairs apartment. The apartment had been empty. The Watchers had not, on the body's autopsy, even checked. Tsubaki had been 4. She had not, in honest F, she had not, in 13 years, forgotten. She came with him on Friday at 11. They went on foot through the city's rain. The Stormcrow's wine cellar was reached by a stairwell off the alley behind the merchant's shop. The merchant, a fat, squat brownie blood, was upstairs counting the night's coin. Tsubaki went up. The brownie was dead in 11 seconds. Tsubaki came down. She had not made noise. They opened the cellar door at 11:48. The cellar smelled of old wine and damp brick. 40 Watchers sat at a long table in the candlelight, drinking, arguing in low voices. Master Brel sat at the head of the table in a black coat, halfway through a sentence. Kaelen closed the cellar door behind them. He set the iron bar across it. He spoke once, in a small, calm voice. "Brel, get up. Come to me." Brel stood. Brel did not, in his last second, understand that the small, calm voice belonged to the runt hobgoblin he had filed a re-evaluation request on. He had time to take 3 steps from the table. Tsubaki took him. She took him in Oni form. She had partial manifested in the stairwell, the red horns through the dark hair, the gold-irised eyes, the lengthened canines. Her hands had the dark red of her ancestry's combat form. She crossed the cellar in 2 strides. She took Brel by the throat. She lifted him. She broke his neck. She let him fall. 11 seconds. The 40 Watchers, around the table, registered. Half of them stood up. Half stayed seated. Kaelen, at the door, said, "All of you, listen. I am going to tell you something. After I tell you, those of you who are willing to walk out of this cellar with me alive will identify yourselves by remaining seated. Those who choose to stand will die in this cellar tonight. You will choose now. I will not repeat." 2 of the standing 40 sat back down. 18 remained standing. 20 had stayed seated. He had, on his estimate, expected 16. The 20 seated were, he registered with the cold clarity of a man who had done his reading, the Watchers who had joined for the wine and the company. They were not committed. They were tired, middle-aged monsters with bad marriages and weak cores who had found, in the Watchers, a place to feel important on Friday nights. They did not, on any honest reading, deserve to die. The 18 standing were the committed. He spoke. He spoke for the seated. The seated stand up. Walk to the wall behind me. Face the wall. Hands on the wall. You will leave this cellar after I am done with the standing. You will not, ever, speak of what you see in the next 5 minutes. The reason you will not speak is that we will, before you leave, take a small lock of your hair. The hair will be kept in a vial by someone you do not know. If you speak, to your spouse, to a confessor, to a wine bottle, the someone will know. The someone will visit you. You will not enjoy the visit. The someone is not me. The someone is more thorough than me. You are not, in this cellar, the priority. The standing are. Walk to the wall. 20 middle-aged monsters walked to the wall. They put their hands on the wall. They did not speak. He turned to the 18 standing. He looked at them for 1 breath. He said, "Tsubaki." She moved. The fight took 3 minutes. Tsubaki took 12. He took 6. He took the 6 with 2 of the earthen vials he had brought. The vinegar and lime trick again at close quarters in a confined space, for blows with the loop of wire, and his bare hands on the last one. Tsubaki took her 12 with her Oni strength, broken necks, crushed sternums, one heart torn out with a closed fist because the man was of vampire blood, and the heart was the only stop. She did not enjoy it. She did not slow. She finished. 18 dead, plus Brel, plus the brownie upstairs. 20 bodies in the building. He turned to the 20 at the wall. He walked along the wall. He took a small lock of each one's hair with a sharp knife. He did not look any of them in the face. He pocketed the locks in a small leather pouch. He spoke once. Walk out. Walk home. Do not, ever, return to this cellar. Do not, ever, attend a watcher's meeting again. Find a new Friday hobby. Sleep well. Good night. The 20 walked out. He and Tsubaki burned the cellar. The fire suppression mechanism in the merchant's shop above had been disabled by Tsubaki on her way through. The cellar burned through the night. The merchant's shop burned with it. The fire department arrived at 3:15 and ruled the fire an electrical fault in the cellar's lamp wiring. The city's main paper ran the story on Sunday. Tragic cellar fire, 21 confirmed dead, including visiting instructor Master Brell. The story noted that the survivors of the cellar fire, 20 middle-aged monsters who had, by their own account, been at a wine tasting upstairs and had escaped the fire by sheer luck, had refused to give interviews. The Watchers of the Quiet, as an organization, dissolved within 6 weeks. The remaining cells around the country, on hearing of the Stormcrow fire, retired one by one. The cult's senior leadership, 3 reclusive monsters at the edge of the empire, decided that the cult had attracted attention they did not, on careful reading, want. By December, the Watchers were a memory. Master Brell was a memory. Kaelen's name had not, in any Watcher document, been recorded. The alcove at lunch on Monday was 6. Tsubaki had been added by Sylvine's quiet hand. Tsubaki did not speak much. She did, however, look at Kaelen during the lunch hour with the small, steady expression of a girl who had killed 12 men beside him on Friday and had decided, on the walk home in the rain, that she was going to be in this alcove for the rest of her life. He had not asked her about the decision. He had, on a quiet calibration, felt it. He had been grateful. The warmth in his ribs, by Monday evening, was the size of a fist and a half. Chapter 11. The Dragon Speaks. Lyrian Vasker approached him on a Thursday in late November. She did not approach him in the corridors. She did not approach him at the practice yards. She approached him, instead, at 6 in the morning on the Academy's outdoor track, on a cold dawn with frost on the grass, while he was running his usual laps. He saw her on the second lap. She was sitting on the low stone wall by the third lap marker in a dark gray training coat. Her gold hair was tied back. She was watching the track. He did not break stride. He ran his third, fourth, fifth lap. She watched. He stopped at the end of the 7th lap. He walked the cool down. He approached the stone wall. He bowed. Senior Vasker. Vrast. How can I help? Sit. He sat on the wall beside her. He did not sit too close. She did not look at him. She said, in the careful, measured voice of a dragon who had been raised to speak no more words than necessary. You killed a glass mantis in October with chemistry. You killed 21 monsters in a wine cellar in November with chemistry and an oni. The cellar story is not yet public knowledge in the Dragon Court, but my mother received a private dispatch from the City Watch's chief commissioner 2 days ago. The dispatch named the cellar as an anomaly. The dispatch noted that 20 witnesses had refused to testify, and that the chief commissioner was, on his own private judgment, satisfied to leave the case closed because the dead were a defunct cult. The dispatch did, however, list the cellar among 5 recent anomalies in the Academy district that my mother's intelligence office is now tracking. The list of anomalies includes the South Yard disk malfunction at intake, the Freshman Tower waterspout incident, the glass mantis kill, the Brell transfer, and the Stormcrow fire. The intelligence office has not, on its review, connected the 5. The intelligence office is, however, going to. I am telling you because I want you to know that I have, on my own reading, connected them already. I would like to ask you, before I file a report to my mother, whether you would be willing to tell me what you are. He looked at her. He did not, on the cold stone wall by the 3rd lap marker, have a clean way out of this conversation. He looked at her for a count of 4 breaths. He said, very quietly, Senior Vasker, may I ask you one question first? Yes. If I tell you what I am, what do you intend to do? She did not move. She did not look at him. She said, I do not know. I have not decided. I would like, before I decide, to know what I am deciding about. I will give you my word, in advance, that I will not act on what you tell me without telling you first. I am Vasker. My word is, in the Dragon Court, binding. I will not violate it. He looked at her for a long count. He believed her. He believed her because he had read Sylvine's briefings on the Vasker court for 3 weeks. The Vasker word had been the foundation of the Eastern Dragon Court's diplomatic protocol for 9 generations. The current Vasker matriarch, Lyrian's mother, had personally executed her own younger brother 30 years ago for breaking a Vasker word given to a foreign court. The dragons did not bluff about their word. He told her. He told her in 5 sentences. She listened. She did not, at any point, change her expression. She did not, at any point, manifest. Her hands stayed on the stone wall. The hands had, faintly, the gold edges of partial dragon transformation, but the edges did not advance. When he finished, she was silent for a long count of 10 breaths. She said, "You are the last. I am the last. You have, in 3 months, killed 23 people and developed an early-stage faith core. I have. You intend, in this lifetime, to end the long quietings residue. I do. You will not, in this lifetime, refound the human race. I have not decided. You should decide. If you decide yes, the Dragon Courts will, on instinct, hunt you to the end of the world. If you decide no, the Dragon Courts will not. The decision is, for the dragons, the only meaningful question. Vrast, what is your decision?" He looked at her. He thought. He thought about it for several seconds. "I do not know yet," he said. "I have been alive in this body for 9 weeks. I have been faith developing for 6. I do not yet have the data to know what I want. I will, in time, decide. I would prefer not to lie to you. I will tell you, when I decide. If you can wait." "How long?" 2 years. "I will wait." A long silence. "Vasker, may I ask why?" She looked at him, finally, for the first time in the conversation. Her eyes were the vertical slit gold of a dragon. The slits were narrow. She said, "I will wait 2 years because I have, in my own family's archive, read the memoirs of my great-grandmother. My great-grandmother participated in the quieting. She wrote a record of it in her old age. The record is sealed. I read it at 15 by stealing the key. The record describes, Vrast, the record describes humans not as a plague. The record describes humans as the only species in the world that, in my great-grandmother's words, had the trick of mercy. The record was written by my great-grandmother in the last summer of her life, with the small private regret of an old dragon. She wrote, near the end, I would like, before I die, to meet one, to ask if the trick was real or if we imagined it. I will not, before I die, meet one. The world is poorer for our work. My great-grandmother died the following winter. I read the record again last spring. I read it a 3rd time after the South Yard disc lit yellow on a runt hobgoblin whose proctor did not look closely. I have been waiting for the chance to ask the question. The question is, Vrast, is the trick real? He looked at her. He thought. He had, in 9 weeks, not killed anyone he had not been required to kill. He had let 20 of the Watchers walk out of the cellar alive when he could have killed them. He had broken Imo Tiennois. Wait, that was a different boy in a different story. He had broken Brask's pride at the wash basin without breaking his bones 3 months ago, when the easier solution had been the spout. He had warned Master Brel through a quiet note routed by Sylvine before he killed him. He had done a series of small mercies along the way. He had not noticed. He thought about the mercies. He said, I do not know if the trick is real. I have done a few small mercies in 3 months. They were practical, not principled. I cannot, on the evidence so far, claim the trick. I can tell you that I would like the trick to be real. I will, on my honor as the last, try to make it real. Will that do, Senior? She looked at him for a long count. She nodded. That will do. Vrast. The terms. I will, for 2 years, observe. I will not write the report. I will, in the same period, sit at the alcove on Wednesdays. Sylvine will permit it. I will speak to her this evening. In return, you will not, in any conversation, lie to me about what you have decided about the question. You will tell me, the day you decide. Yes or no. I will accept either. I have, in my own private decision, prepared myself for either. I will accept either with my word, which the Dragon Court considers binding. Accepted. Good. She stood up. She paused. She turned. She said, in the same careful, measured voice, one more thing. Yes. My grandmother, the one who participated in the quieting, left, on her death, a small object to my mother. The object was, by my mother's quiet description, the last gift a human gave me before I killed him. The object is in my mother's reliquary. I have, since 15, wondered what it was. My mother does not show it to anyone. The day you decide your answer, I will ask my mother to show me the gift. I will, if she shows me, bring you a description. I think, Vrast, I think it may be, on the answer to the question, useful to you. She walked away across the cold grass of the dawn. He watched her go. The warmth in his ribs, on the stone wall, had grown by an increment he could not measure. He went to breakfast. The alcove on the following Wednesday was 7. Chapter 12. The Fall in the Practice Yard. The 7th harem member, though he would not call her that, because he had not, by this point in his life, ever called any of them that, and would not for a long time, arrived not through the alcove, but through a near-fatal practice yard accident in early December. The girl was Aisine. She was a Lamia blood. 16. Her human form had silver hair, eyes the pale green of new spring leaves, and the slight slow grace of a snake blood who had, since the age of 9, trained in lower court blade work with a sword that, by tradition, ran a faintly poisoned edge. She was, by the cohort's quiet consensus, the most beautiful first year. She was also the most disliked. The Lamia courts had a long-standing reputation for cruelty toward other races, and Aisine had been, since the first week of intake, on the receiving end of a small, steady campaign of social isolation by the cohort's senior cliques. Viola Drogan had refused, on principle, to participate. Tsubaki Karin had not, on principle, participated in any cohort campaign. Marlovel had, after meeting Aisine once at a corridor crossing, decided that Aisine's emotional red was not what the cohort thought it was, in fact, that of a girl who had been raised by an extremely cold mother and who had, since the age of 4, been taught not to need other people. Aisine had been at the academy 3 months without speaking to anyone. The accident, in the second week of December, was simple. The practice yard's overhead rail system, which carried mecha-class targeting drones for senior shooting exercises, had a known weakness in its third pulley. The pulley had been scheduled for replacement 6 months ago. The replacement had not happened because the school's facilities office had decided the maintenance budget was needed for the gala. The third pulley had been, on every wet day since October, slipping a 1/4 inch. On a Thursday afternoon at 4:15, the third pulley broke. The drone it was carrying, a 60-kilo iron frame practice target, fell. It fell from 12 meters of altitude toward the practice yard's lower track, where the first-year shooting class had been finishing its session. Aisine was directly under it. She was directly under it because she had been the last student to leave the lower track, because she was the last to leave everything. She did not, by her training, walk in groups, and because the drone's fall path intersected her walking path at the exact instant of the pulley's failure. She did not see the drone fall. She did not see it because Lamia eyes did not, by biology, track well above the horizontal. Kaelen Vrast saw it. He was 30 meters away at the upper tracks water station, finishing a long run. He looked up at the rail's distinctive snap sound. He registered the drone's trajectory. He registered Aisine's position. He registered that no other student was in proximity to her. He had perhaps 2 seconds. He ran. He ran at a speed whose Sonway's, Kaelen's, body had not been demonstrating in any prior public exercise. The body was, by his quiet conditioning over 3 months, faster than the cohort believed. The conditioning had been quiet. It had been quiet so that the cohort would, on any future occasion of speed, register surprise, but not investigation. This was a future occasion. He crossed the 30 meters in 3 seconds. He did not, in 3 seconds, have time to reach I-sign and pull her clear. He had time to reach I-sign and put himself between her and the drone. He did that. He hit I-sign in the side at speed. The hit knocked her sideways, 4 feet, out of the drone's line. The drone hit the place she had been standing. The drone hit Kaelen instead. The drone was 60 kilos of iron at 12-meter terminal velocity. It hit his back at the right shoulder. The shoulder broke. His clavicle broke. 2 ribs broke on the right side. He hit the ground face first. He felt his right knee twist on the landing. He did not, in the 3rd second, lose consciousness. He felt the warmth in his ribs flare. The warmth flared because the faith principle had a 3rd, unwritten rule that Sylvain had not yet taught him, but that he had, in the half-second of impact, discovered for himself. Faith fed on the witness. There were 40 witnesses on the practice yard. 40 witnesses had just seen a runt hobgoblin cross 30 meters in 3 seconds to take a 60-kilo iron drone for a lamia. The 40 witnesses' belief, every last one of them, surged into him in the same heartbeat. The warmth in his ribs grew, in 2 seconds, from the size of a fist to the size of a melon. The growth was painful. The growth was, on the secondary effect of the warmth, also a healer. The bones that had broken began, immediately, to set. Not entirely, not perfectly, but the breaks set, and the bleeding inside him slowed, and the pain receded by half. He rolled onto his back. He coughed. He spat blood. He looked up. I-sign was on her knees beside him. Her face had, for the first time in her 3 months at the academy, an expression. The expression was the expression of a girl who had been told her whole life that she was alone, who had been alone, and who had just, in the same second that the iron had hit the boy, been not. She did not speak. She put both her hands flat on his chest. She did the thing Lamia did when a fellow snakeblood was wounded. She sang. It was the Lamia healing song. It was, by every record the Academy's lore office had filed, a song that no Lamia had given to a non-Lamia in 2,000 years. It was the song of the snake house, the song that Lamia mothers sang to their dying. I-sign sang it, in the practice yard, in front of 40 witnesses, with both her hands on the chest of a runt hobgoblin she had not, until 2 seconds ago, spoken to. The song was, by every cohort student who heard it, the kind of song that you only heard once in your life. The song knit his ribs. The song closed the internal bleeding. The song did not, in honest fact, wait. He had decided to stop saying in honest fact. The song did not, by his quiet count, fix him. The song stabilized him. He would still need a healer at the medical wing for the clavicle. But he would live. He looked up at I-sign. He said, quietly, "Thank you." She did not answer. She kept singing. She sang for 2 minutes. The 40 witnesses on the yard did not move. They watched. They listened. By the time she finished, the Academy's medical detail had arrived. The medical detail took him to the wing. I-sign walked beside the stretcher. The 40 witnesses dispersed slowly, with the small private look of cohort students who had just seen something they were not, on standard cohort gossip, going to be able to forget. In the medical wing, I-sign sat by the bed for 2 hours while the healers worked. When the healers were done, when Kaelen was set in a clean splint with his right arm immobilized and his side strapped, I-sign, still without speaking, bowed to him at the foot of the bed. He said quietly, "I-sign, Kaelen Vrast. Thank you for the song. You took the iron for me." "I did. Will you be all right?" "I will be all right. I have not been spoken to in 3 months. Vrast, I am not, by Lamia training, good at speaking. I would like to learn. I would like, if you will permit it, to learn at your bench. The bench you eat at, with the wolf and the oni and the others. I would like to sit at it. I will not, at first, speak. I will, with time, speak. Will you permit it? I would be honored, I sign. She bowed again. She walked out of the medical wing. She came to dinner that evening. She sat at the third bench, third row from the entrance, the bench he had begun calling, in his own head, the alcove's bench in the dining hall. Viola, on her left, said nothing. Tsubaki, on her right, said nothing. Marlowe, across from her, smiled. Isign did not speak for the entire meal. She ate slowly. She left her plate clean. She bowed to the table at the end of the meal and walked out. She came the next night, and the night after. By the end of the week, she had said 3 sentences across 4 dinners. By the end of the month, she was speaking like a person. The warmth in his ribs, by Christmas, was the size of 2 melons. Chapter 13. The Quieting Returns. The quieting returned on a Wednesday in late January. It returned in the form of 3 letters, delivered on the same morning to 3 separate addresses, in 3 separate hands. Letter 1 went to the Academy's headmaster. It was an anonymous tip from a city informant naming Master Brell's suspicious death as a probable cover-up by an Academy faction. The letter requested a discreet investigation. The headmaster read it twice and dropped it in his fire. Letter 2 went to the Vorin clan's senior council. It was an internal Vorin memo, written by a junior clan investigator who had been quietly watching Sylvine for 3 months on the council's own initiative. The memo noted Sylvine's pattern of late-night library visits, her unusual sponsorship of a freshman from a runt hobgoblin family, and the unsettling correlation between her sponsorship and the death of 3 minor monsters connected to Watcher's cells. The memo recommended a private conversation between the clan's senior matriarch and Sylvine. The matriarch read the memo and laughed at it, and filed it in her low-priority drawer. Letter 3 went to a small black-tile mansion on the outskirts of the city, occupied by a man who did not, on the city's records, exist. The man was a speaker of the long quieting. The speakers were not a cult. The speakers were the original. They were the 7 monsters who had, 900 years ago, designed and executed the extermination of humanity. They had not died. They were, by a magic the world had largely forgotten, immortal. They had, since the quieting, watched the world quietly from positions of small obscure authority. A wine merchant, a tax clerk, a city archivist, a forester, a librarian, a back-alley healer, and the man on the outskirts of the city who had no profession at all. There were 7 speakers. There had always been 7. If any of them died, a new one was raised within a year. The speakers did not, in the cohort's history of the Academy, get involved in Academy politics. They did not need to. They had been waiting for a single trigger, the reappearance of a human. Letter 3 told the speaker on the outskirts of the city that the trigger had appeared. The speaker read the letter. The speaker did not, on reading, do anything immediate. The speaker did not act on the Academy's grounds. The speaker was 900 years old, and patience was the speaker's only remaining virtue. The speaker called a meeting of the 7. The 7 met 3 weeks later, in February, in a stone hut at the foot of the mountain, far from any city, on a night with no moon. They sat in a circle on the floor. They did not speak for the first hour. The 7 did not, in their long collective experience, speak unless they had something definite to say. The wine merchant speaker spoke first. She said, "The boy is at Veilcourt. The girl Vorin has covered him for 4 months. The girl is a Vorin. The Vorin will, by their own treaty with us, surrender her if we ask. The boy will be in our hands within a week." The forester speaker spoke second. He said, "The boy has, by our quiet observation, accumulated a small cohort. 6 members. 3 are first cousin tier of great houses. 2 are clan-matched. 1 is a runt-tier lamia. The cohort is small. The cohort is, on its own, not a threat. The cohort is, however, a complication. If we move on the boy, the cohort will move on us. The cohort will lose. The cohort's losing will be public. The cohort's losing will, on the great houses reading, become a story about the seven of us. The story will be inconvenient. The great houses do not, in their current generation, remember our names. They will, if we make the story, remember. The remembrance will be bad for us. The back alley healer speaker spoke third. She said, "We do not need the cohort to lose publicly. We need the boy to disappear quietly. The cohort can be left alive. The boy can be removed. The girl Vorin can be persuaded, by her own clan's matriarch, to deliver him to us under a false pretext. The pretext can be a private audience with a senior clan elder. The girl will comply because the matriarch will tell her to. The boy will accompany the girl because the boy trusts the girl. We will receive him. We will, in our private chamber, end him. The cohort will be told that the boy has, on a private matter, transferred to a distant academy. The cohort will, in 3 months, forget. The story will not, in any way, reach the great houses. The cohort will not lose. The boy will simply not be. The seven nodded. They voted. They voted yes. The voted plan was, in its details. The Vorin matriarch would, in the next 10 days, instruct Sylvine to bring the boy to a private audience with a senior clan elder at the Vorin townhouse in the city. Sylvine would comply because the matriarch's instruction was, by clan protocol, binding. The boy would accompany Sylvine because the boy trusted Sylvine. At the townhouse, the boy would be received by an elder who was, in fact, the wine merchant speaker in disguise. The speaker would end the boy in the townhouse's lower chamber. Sylvine would, by clan protocol, witness the end without intervening, because the matriarch's order would forbid intervention. Sylvine's silence would be enforced by her clan's binding oath. The boy's body would be removed by the speakers and burned. The seven, in the stone hut, agreed on the timeline. They left the hut. They went, separately, back to their lives. The wine merchant speaker, on her walk back to the city, did not see the small dark shape on the ridge above the hut, 300 meters up, watching her with eyes the color of beaten gold. Lyrian Vasker, in partial dragon form, had been watching the hut for 3 hours. She had, in November, on her promise to Kaelen, sat at the alcove on Wednesdays. She had, in the same month, asked her mother about the gift. Her mother had not, on her asking, shown the gift. Her mother had, however, given her a private piece of information. The 7 speakers of the quieting had not died, and the Vasker matriarch had been quietly tracking their locations for 30 years on a private intelligence project of her own. Lyrian had asked, in December, for the location data. The Vasker matriarch had given it to her. Lyrian had begun, in January, watching the locations one by one. She had, on the night of the Seven's meeting in the stone hut, been on the ridge. She had heard every word. She had, on the walk back, not engaged. She had, on her promise to Kaelen, not engaged because she had committed 2 years to observation. She had committed to not act on what she knew without telling him first. She returned to the academy at dawn. She wrote a single short note. She sealed it. She delivered it to Kaelen Vrast's quarters in the freshman tower at 6 in the morning. The note read, Vrast, the 7 met last night in the foot hut. The plan is the Vorin townhouse, via Sylvine, within 10 days. The wine merchant will be the executioner. I heard every word. Sylvine's matriarch will order her in 3 days. Sylvine will, on her clan's binding, comply. The plan ends with you dead. I am, by my promise, telling you. I am not, by my promise, acting. You decide what you will do. I will sit at the alcove on Wednesday. I will, after the alcove, do what you have decided. L. Kaelen Vrast, in his quarters, at 6 in the morning, read the note. He read it twice. He folded it. He burned it in his wash basin. He sat on the edge of his bed for the count of 5 breaths. He laughed once, very quietly, very dry. All right then, he said. Hard mode it is. He stood up. He had 10 days. He had, by his current count, in his ribs, the warmth of 2 melons of faith. He had 6 allies in the cohort, 1 upper cohort dragon, 1 upper cohort vampire, 1 upper cohort kitsune. He had killed 23 people. He had not, in his life, killed an immortal. He thought about it. He decided. He decided to kill all 7. He went to breakfast. Chapter 14, The 8-Day Plan. He sat down at the alcove on Wednesday at lunch with the 7 members of his cohort in attendance: Sylvine, Yamirii, Viella, Tsubaki, Marlowe, Lyrian, Isine, plus the new 8th seat, which had been empty for 3 months, but which Sylvine had, on a quiet, anticipatory hunch, kept set with a teacup. The 8th seat was occupied that day by a girl Sylvine had brought to the alcove the previous evening with a small, precise nod and the explanation: "This is Sellers of Renal. She is a Nephilim, 4th tier. She is on the lower senior cohort. She has, on her own initiative, asked for a place in the alcove. I have decided to grant it. The reason will become clear. Sellers of Renal was Nephilim, angel blood. The Nephilim were, in this world, the result of a brief alliance 900 years ago between 3 of the 7 races and a small cohort of fallen angels who had, on their own court's quiet schism, broken from the angel courts and helped some of the monster races against the humans. The alliance had ended within 40 years. The Nephilim line had survived, scattered, in small noble houses. Sellers was the daughter of the smallest such house, the of Renal of the southern desert. She had silver hair, eyes the color of pale dust, and the faint, almost invisible scar of 2 folded wings along her shoulder blades that, on full manifestation, became wings. She was 18. She had, by Sylvine's quiet briefing, been a senior at Veilcourt for 2 years. She had been silent for those 2 years for one specific reason. Her own family had, on her 16th birthday, given her a sealed letter from her grandmother that revealed the of Renal line's old shame. The shame was that the of Renal had, at 15 years into the long quieting, refused to continue. The of Renal had, on their own court's vote, walked off the field. They had been the only ones who had walked off. They had been, in the long quiet aftermath, treated as cowards by the other Nephilim and the 7 races. They had survived by becoming small. Sellers had read the letter at 16. She had decided, in her own quiet, that the of Renal had been right and the world had been wrong. She had spent the next 2 years at Veilcourt being unobtrusive, observing, waiting. She had, on Tuesday evening, gone to Sylvine's quarters and said, "I have, on my own intelligence, learned that you are sponsoring a human. I am, on my own family's history, available. Please." Sylvine had said yes. The alcove on Wednesday at lunch, with all 8 seats filled, was the most complete it had ever been. Kaelen looked around the alcove at the 8. He said, 10 days. 7 speakers. Plan. He told them what Lyrian had heard at the stone hut. He gave them the deadline. He laid out the broad shape of his thinking. The 7 could not be taken in their own homes, too well defended, too dispersed, too aware. The 7 would, on Sylvine's clan summons, come to the Vorin townhouse to receive him for the planned ending. Not all 7 would attend. Only the wine merchant, per their plan. But the wine merchant, in the moment of taking him into the lower chamber, would be alone with him. The wine merchant would be the most vulnerable any speaker had been since the quieting. He would take the wine merchant. He would, in the process of taking her, extract the locations and protocols of the other 6. He would, with the cohort, hit the other 6 within the next 48 hours, in a coordinated single night, before the 7 could regroup. The Vorin clan would, on the wine merchant's disappearance, be furious. The matriarch would, on the Academy's reading, retaliate against Sylvine. The matriarch, however, would not retaliate against Sylvine if Sylvine, in the moments after the lower chamber, walked upstairs to the matriarch's quarters and personally killed her. Sylvine, on her own quiet count, had been waiting for the matriarch's death for 2 years. The clan, on the matriarch's death, would pass to Sylvine's mother, who was Sylvine's own backer and who had, on her own private intelligence, been hoping for the matriarch's removal since the previous winter. The Vorin clan would, in 3 days, be Sylvine's family in the way Sylvine wanted it to be. The 7 speakers, in 3 days, would be 6 bodies and 1 missing wine merchant. The quieting's residue, in 3 days, would be a memory. He laid the plan out across 40 minutes. The alcove listened. The alcove asked questions. Marlowe, on the question of the wine merchant, what about her desire read? She is 900 years old. She will read your absence pattern. Kaelen, I will not be human in the lower chamber. I will be a runt hobgoblin. I will have, in the lower chamber, a small pocket vial of fresh hobgoblin core fluid that you, Marlowe, will, by Sylvine's clan procurement, obtain on the 7th day. The vial will, on contact with my skin, project a hobgoblin core read for 90 seconds. The wine merchant will read the projection. The 90 seconds will be sufficient for what I need to do. Marlowe, where will you keep the vial? Kaelen, under my tongue. Glass shell, breakable on bite. I will bite when she enters the chamber. Marlowe, understood. Yumiri, on the question of the timing. You cannot, in 90 seconds of hobgoblin cover, defeat a 900-year-old speaker. The speaker has spell defenses you have not encountered. You will need to break the defenses first. Kaelen, I will not be defeating her in 90 seconds. I will be buying her trust for 90 seconds. The trust will let her come close. At close range, I will use the second vial in my other pocket. The second vial is a faith anchor. Sylvine, who had been quiet, said, You have built a faith anchor. Kaelen, I have. It took 2 weeks. It works. Sylvine, what does it do? Kaelen, it binds the will of any creature within 6 paces to a single statement I make at the moment of activation. The statement is preloaded. It is 1 sentence. The sentence is binding for 90 seconds. Sylvine, the sentence. Kaelen, tell me the locations and protocols of the other 6 speakers, completely and without omission. A long silence. Lyrian, on the question of the other 6. The 6 will, on the wine merchant's failure to return, scatter within an hour. We will have 1 hour to reach them. 6 teams. Kaelen, yes. 6 teams. I will name them now. He named them. The Forester Speaker. Lives in the eastern woods, for hours' ride from the city. Team. Viella in full wolf form. Viella's pack runners can move in the forest faster than the speaker's own woods magic. Viella will hunt him. She will not bring him back. The Tax Clerk Speaker. Lives in the city, 4th floor of a tax office, ground level escape via the back stairwell. Team. Tsubaki. The tax clerk is, on her dossier, the weakest of the 7 in physical combat. Tsubaki's only form will end him in 3 exchanges. The City Archivist Speaker. Lives in the city, sealed within an archive vault with elaborate wards. Team. Yumiri. The wards are kitsune readable. Yumiri will defeat them by reading their priors and unwinding them in 12 minutes. She will, in the same 12 minutes, set a small fire on the way in. The fire will, on the archivist's standard protocols, force him to manifest in the open. Yumiri will end him then. The Librarian Speaker. Lives in the Academy's own historical library. Team. Marlowe, working with Isign. Marlowe will, on her succubus read, identify the moment the librarian's desire anchor weakens. He keeps a stopper jar of his own desire anchor in a locked cabinet. On her read, he opens the jar every evening at 9 to refresh his bindings. Isign, in the same moment, will sing the Lamia's killing song. The killing song is the inverse of the healing song. It will end him. Isign has not, in her life, sung it. She has been taught it. She will sing it that night for the first time. The Back Alley Healer Speaker. Lives in an apartment above a tea shop in the lower city. Team. Cella's in full Nephilim manifestation. The healer is, on her dossier, vulnerable to angelic line abilities specifically. Seles's wings will be the first wings the healer has seen in 800 years. The healer will be too startled to defend. Seles will end her. The man on the outskirts. Lives in the Black Tile Mansion. Team. Lyrian in full dragon form. The man's mansion is warded against everything except dragonfire. The matriarch's intelligence file noted this as a single forgotten gap. Lyrian will fly to the mansion, burn the wards from the air, descend, end him. 6 teams. 6 speakers. 1 hour. Kaelen would, in the same hour, take the wine merchant in the Vorin townhouse cellar. Plus Sylvine, in the matriarch's chamber upstairs, doing what Sylvine had been waiting 2 years to do. The alcove listened. The alcove asked, one by one, the technical questions for their assigned speakers. The alcove planned. By the end of the lunch hour, the plan was complete. Kaelen looked at the 8. He said, Wednesday next week. The matriarch will summon Sylvine tomorrow. Sylvine will, on the matriarch's order, agree. Sylvine will set the audience for 10 days from today. The audience will be at the Vorin townhouse at 9 in the evening. I will arrive at 8:50. The wine merchant will be in the lower chamber waiting. Marlowe will have delivered the core fluid vial to me by 8:45. The 6 teams will be in position at their respective targets by 8:50. At 9, the wine merchant will receive me. By 9:03, I will have used the faith anchor. By 9:05, I will have the locations and protocols. I will, by 9:06, end her. Sylvine will, by 9:08, be in the matriarch's chamber. By 9:15, the matriarch will have ended. By 9:30, the 6 teams will have ended their targets. The plan is 28 minutes from start to finish. The alcove nodded. Sylvine said, One question. Yes. The wine merchant. After you have ended her. The body. I will absorb her. Absorb. The faith anchor, when I activate it, also feeds. The feeding takes the absorbed creature's residue into my own warmth. The residue is, by my reading of the senior library faith books, the precise small unit of belief the creature has been holding for 900 years. I will gain, by my estimate, the size of a small kitchen from her. The size of the kitchen will be useful in the next hour. Understood. The alcove rose. They walked out of the senior library, separately, with the bored expressions of students returning to their afternoon classes. The plan was on. 10 days became 8. The matriarch summoned Sylvine the next morning. Sylvine agreed to the audience. The audience was scheduled for Wednesday next week, at 9 in the evening, at the Vorin townhouse. Kaelen, that night, lay in his bunk in the freshman tower's 3rd floor and looked at the ceiling and felt, in his ribs, the warmth of 2 melons of faith. In 8 days, he was going to absorb the residue of a 900-year-old speaker and the kitchen-sized belief in her chest. He smiled. The dark of his quarters did not answer. He slept. Chapter 15, the night of. Wednesday evening at 8:48. Kaelen Vrast walked under the Vorin townhouse's portico in a black coat, with a small glass shell under his tongue and the faith anchor vial in his right coat pocket and a thin folded paper in his left coat pocket on which he had written, in the morning, the single faith anchor sentence. Marlowe, who had delivered the core fluid shell at the alley corner 2 minutes earlier, had walked away to her own assignment. The townhouse's main hall was lit by candles. The Vorin matriarch was upstairs in her chamber, waiting. Sylvine was at the foot of the main staircase in her formal Vorin black, her face the small still mask she wore in front of her clan. She did not, in front of the household staff, embrace him. She did not, in front of the household staff, give him any sign. She said only, "The elder is in the lower chamber. Follow me." He followed her. The lower chamber was reached by a narrow stone staircase off the kitchen corridor. Sylvine led him down. At the bottom of the staircase was a door. The door was iron. Sylvine paused at the door. She looked at him. For the count of 1 breath, she let her face show what she had not shown anywhere in the house. The small grief of a young woman who was sending a friend into a room she could not, by her clan's binding. Enter. He nodded. He bit through the glass shell under his tongue. The hobgoblin core fluid bloomed in his mouth. The fluid was thick and tasted of iron. He swallowed it. The 90-second cover began. Sylvain opened the iron door. He walked through. The chamber was small, stone-walled, lit by 2 oil lamps. A single chair stood at the center. In the chair sat an old woman in plain gray robes with her hands folded in her lap. She had white hair, lined skin, the small, still face of a woman who had, in 900 years, done a great deal of waiting. The wine merchant speaker. Sylvain closed the door behind him. The wine merchant looked at him. She read him. She read the hobgoblin core. The cover held. She smiled, very gently. Kaelen Vrast. Come closer. Sit on the floor. Let me look at you. He sat on the floor at the foot of her chair. 4 paces away. He needed her at 6 paces or closer for the faith anchor. She was at 4. He had her. He reached, very slowly, into his right pocket, with the small, embarrassed expression of a runt hobgoblin reaching for a handkerchief. He pulled out the vial. He activated it. He spoke the sentence. Tell me the locations and protocols of the other 6 speakers, completely and without omission. The faith anchor bloomed. The wine merchant's eyes, pale gray, ancient, went briefly cloudy. She told him. She told him everything for the count of 1 minute and 43 seconds. She told him the exact street addresses, the precise ward protocols, the known weaknesses, the recognition signals, the night patterns, the food preferences, the unstopper jar of the librarian, the back alley healer's habit of taking tea at 9, the city archivist's fire protocol, the forester's affinity for a particular oak, the tax clerk's habit of escape, the outskirtsman's mansion ward gap. She told him, also, for things he had not asked. She told him, first, I have wanted to be ended for 200 years. I am tired. The quieting was the wrong thing. We did the wrong thing. Thank you for ending it. She told him, second, the gift my great-grandmother, no. My apologies. The gift the Veilcourt matriarch keeps in her reliquary is a small wooden bird, carved by the last human killed in my city. The bird whistles when wound. The whistle is the human's voice. The bird's name is Thrush. The Veilcourt matriarch has wound it once. She wept for an hour. She has not wound it since. Tell Lyrian. She told him, third, there are not 7 of us. There are 8. The 8th is not on our council. The 8th is a speaker who, on the year of the quieting's completion, refused to bind to immortality. The 8th chose to age normally. The 8th has been dead, of natural causes, for 840 years. The 8th left, before he died, a sealed box in the catacombs under the city's oldest cathedral. The box was not, by his last instruction, to be opened until a human returned. You are the human. The box is for you. The catacombs entrance is behind the cathedral's 3rd pillar from the east. The pillar moves on a sliding stone. The stone is operated by a small carved hand grip on its underside. You will need to reach under and pull. The box is in the 3rd niche on the right. There is no ward. The 8th did not believe in wards. Open it. Read it. Decide. She told him, 4th, Kaelen Vrast. The faith anchor is, by my reading, the strongest first-year faith binding in the recorded archive. You have, in 5 months, become more dangerous than any of the 7 feared. We were right to fear. Be careful with what we feared. The quieting was the wrong thing. The returning could, in the wrong hand, also be a wrong thing. Decide carefully. The 90 seconds of the anchor ended. Her eyes cleared. She looked at him. She did not, in her last seconds, manifest. She did not, in her last seconds, fight. She said only, thank you. He stood up. He crossed the 4 paces. He put his hand on the side of her face. The hand was the carrier for the absorption. The faith anchor, on a closing touch, fed. He said quietly, thank you, speaker. Rest. She closed her eyes. She unmade. The unmaking was not violent. The unmaking was slow. Her body, in 3 seconds, became a small, still pile of pale gray robes on the chair. Her residue, the small, kitchen-sized core of belief she had held for 900 years, flowed up his arm and into his ribs. The warmth in his ribs flared. The warmth grew, in 3 seconds, from 2 melons to a melon and a kitchen. He stood for a moment beside the empty robes. He breathed. He folded the robes. He set them on the chair. He bowed once. He turned. He opened the iron door. Sylvine was at the top of the staircase. She did not, in front of him, change her expression. He climbed the stairs. He met her at the top. He gave her a single short nod. She gave him a single short nod back. She walked up the main staircase, toward her matriarch's chamber. He walked out the back of the townhouse, down the alley, into the city. He had 25 minutes to confirm the 6. He confirmed them by walking to the small park at the corner of the Academy district, where a wall-mounted public message board with a chalk and slate notation system allowed 5 quick chalk marks. Each team had been assigned a corner of the board. Each team would, at the moment of their target's end, walk to the board on their way home and put a single small mark in their corner. By 9:28, all 6 corners were marked. By 9:30, an additional mark in Sylvine's corner indicated that the matriarch was dead. He stood for a moment at the message board in the cold January dark. 8 in 1 hour. 7 speakers and a vampire matriarch. The quieting's residue, in the count he had just completed, was a memory. He walked back to the academy. He passed under the gate at 10:11. He went to his quarters. He undressed. He bathed. He climbed into bed. The warmth in his ribs, by the time he closed his eyes, was, by his count, the size of a small room. He smiled in the dark. He slept. Chapter 16, The Last 2. In the morning, the city's papers carried 6 obituaries. The papers ran the obituaries on the back pages because the 6 dead had not, on the city's public record, been important enough for front-page treatment. Wine merchant, tax clerk, city archivist, librarian, back-alley healer, forester, reclusive private citizen on the outskirts. 7 separate deaths in a single night, by varied causes, in widely separated locations, with no evident connection on first reading. The 7th obituary was for Iviva Vorin, matriarch of the Vorin clan, dead in her sleep of natural causes at the age of 291. Survived by her daughter Tiana Vorin, who succeeds to the clan, and granddaughter Sylvine Vorin, who is at this date a senior student at Veilcourt Academy. The papers did not connect the 8. The city did not connect the 8. By the end of the week, the 7 speakers' little obscure deaths had been forgotten by the city entirely. The Vorin matriarch's succession had been celebrated. Tiana Vorin's first public statement as the new matriarch had thanked the city for its kindness and announced that the Vorin clan was, on the new generation's reading, prepared to be more open in its dealings with other clans. The other clans had taken the statement at face value. The city had moved on. Inside the academy, the alcove ate breakfast together for the first time on a Thursday morning. They sat at a single long table in the senior dining hall. Sylvine had, on her new family authority as the matriarch's heir, exercised a small clan privilege that allowed her to host a single open table per week for guests of any cohort. The 8 sat. The hall watched. The hall did not, on its reading, know what to make of the table. The alcove did not, in the dining hall, discuss the previous night. They ate. They were polite. Tsubaki ate 3 bowls of porridge. Vala ate 4. Isine ate slowly. Lyrian drank tea. Marlowe ate 1 piece of fruit and asked Isine about her morning. Yumiri read a book. Sella sat with her hands folded. Kaelen ate slowly. The warmth in his ribs was, by morning, the size of a small library. He spoke once at the table. He spoke to all of them. He said quietly, "There is one more." The 8th speaker. The one who chose to age. He left, by the wine merchant's last words, a sealed box in the catacombs under the city's oldest cathedral. The box is, by his instruction, for me. I am going to retrieve it tonight. I am, however, going to retrieve it alone. The reason is not that I do not want company. The reason is that the box has been waiting for a human, alone, for 840 years. The instruction was for the human to come alone. I am, by my reading of his instruction, going to honor it. If the box turns out to be a trap, I will, on my own count, handle it. I am the one whose decision is in the box. The alcove looked at him. Sylvine nodded. Lyrian nodded. The rest nodded. He walked, alone, that night, to the cathedral. He found the third pillar from the east. He reached under it. He pulled the carved hand grip. The pillar slid sideways. A small stone staircase opened down into the dark. He took a small lamp from his coat pocket and descended. The catacombs were old. Older than the cathedral. Older, by a margin, than the quieting. The walls were unmarked. He walked the corridor by the lamp's light. The third niche on the right held, on a small stone shelf, a wooden box about the size of a loaf of bread. He took the box. He carried it back up the staircase. He slid the pillar back into place. He carried the box out of the cathedral and through the city and back to the academy and up to his quarters. He set the box on his desk. He did not, immediately, open it. He sat for a while. He thought. He thought about the wine merchant's last 4 sentences. We did the wrong thing. The returning could also be a wrong thing. Decide carefully. He thought about Lyrian's 2-year wait. He thought about Sylvine's new throne. He thought about Viola's pack-grandmother and the stoppered jar. He thought about Tsubaki's father, the half-blood protector who had been killed for a suspicion of harboring a lamia. He thought about Isign, 3 months silent. He thought about Marlowe's catalog and Selaz's grandmother's letter and Yumiriai's amused private silence and the small detached calm of his own ribs that had, in 5 months, grown a faith that filled a library. He thought about faith. Faith was, by the senior library's books, the human's tool. Faith made the world bend. Faith could refound a race. Faith could overturn a quieting. Faith could, in the right hand, do anything. Faith could also, in the wrong hand, do anything. He opened the box. Inside was a single folded paper. The paper, in old human script, read, "To the one who finds me. I died of natural causes in the year 840. I was a speaker of the quieting. I refused immortality because I did not, on my own private reading, deserve it. I had, with the other 6, ended my own species. I would not, in addition, hide behind centuries. I left this letter because, in the night of the quieting's completion, I overheard the council say a small private thing they did not say in their official record. They said, if the human returns, the returning will be the question. I assumed, at the time, this meant the question of whether the human would be allowed to live. I have, in 840 years of being dead, had time to reconsider. I now believe the question was different. The question was, will the returning be a restoration or a replacement? Restoration, you refound the human race, slowly, over generations, by faith and patience. The world becomes 7 races and humans, as before. The quieting is undone. The other races are, eventually, forgiven by their descendants. Replacement, you use the full power of faith to remake the world without the other races. You become, in honest fact, apologies, I have not heard this phrasing. You become the one who makes the new world. The other races, in this world, do not exist. Only humans. The quieting is mirrored. I have, in 840 years, decided. I cannot speak for you. I will, however, write to you what I would have done. I would not have chosen restoration. The pain of the quieting was, on its survivors, total. To ask the next generation of humans to live alongside the descendants of those who killed their kin would be cruel. I, who was a speaker, do not deserve to ask it of them. I would not have chosen replacement either. Replacement is the quieting in reverse. The mirror is, for me, an unbearable shape. I would have chosen a third path. The path is this. Become the human. Do not refound. Do not replace. Live among the other races as the only one. Make of your one life a long argument that humans are worth refounding, but refuse to be the one to refound. Trust the world, after your one life, to remember you and to make the decision. If the world, after you, refounds, that is the world's choice. If the world does not, that is also the world's choice. Do not, with your one faith, choose for it. This is what I would have done. I am, perhaps, wrong. I am only one speaker. You will decide what you will do. A small last thing. My name was Imel. I had a brother who was killed in the quieting. He was a baker. He made a kind of small honey bread that the city, in his time, was famous for. The recipe is in the back of this letter. If you would like, in the years you have left, to make it, I would be grateful. Be well, last one. Imel. P.S. There is, in the city's old western quarter, a small bakery still operating. The bakery has been there 900 years. The bakery makes the honey bread. The recipe was kept by Imel's brother's last apprentice, who taught it to her daughter, who taught it to hers, and so on. The current baker is a young woman named Nessa Vaught. She is human passing wraith blood. She does not, on her family records, know what the honey bread is. She bakes it every Sunday. She thinks her great-grandmother invented it. P.P.S. Go on a Sunday. Eat the bread. Tell her what it is. She has a right to know. Kaelen Vrast read the letter 4 times. He set it down on the desk. He sat for a long time with his hands flat on his knees. He had not, in 5 months, wept. He wept now. He wept for 9 breaths. Then he stopped. He cleaned his face. He folded the letter. He set it back in the box. He took the recipe out. He read it. It was a simple recipe. He went to bed. In the morning, he went to the small bakery in the old western quarter. The bakery had a hand-painted sign. The smell of warm honey came out the door. He walked in. A young woman about his age was behind the counter. Black hair, pale skin, eyes the color of slate, the small, still face of a wraith blood. Nessa Vaught. She looked up. What would you like? The honey bread. 1 loaf. She wrapped a loaf in paper. She took his coin. She gave him the loaf. He paused at the counter. He said, very quietly, Nessa, I have something to tell you about the recipe. May I tell you? Not now. On a quiet evening. I have a long story. It will take an hour. It will be a strange story. You will, on hearing it, decide whether to believe me. I will not, in any case, ask anything of you. I will only ask, if you have an hour, to come to a bench in the lake park by the academy this Sunday at sunset. I will be there. If you do not come, I will not return. Nessa Vaught looked at him for a long count. She said, all right. Sunday. He bowed slightly. He walked out of the bakery. He carried the loaf home. He cut it. He ate 2 slices. He brought the rest to the alcove that evening. The alcove ate it together. He did not, that evening, tell them the recipe's history. He told them only that he had read Imel's letter, that he had decided on Imel's 3rd path, and that he was not, in this life, going to refound or replace. He would, instead, be the human. He would live in the world that was alongside them. They would, after his life, decide for themselves. The alcove listened. The alcove nodded. Lyrian Vasker, on the alcove's silence, stood up. She walked to him. She bowed. She said, Vrast. The trick is real. He bowed back. He said, thank you. She returned to her seat. Sylvine, at the head of the table, drank her tea. The warmth in his ribs, that evening, was no larger than the library it had been the previous morning. It had stopped growing. He understood, on the 3rd bite of the honey bread, why. The 3rd path did not require unlimited faith. The 3rd path required exactly the faith of one life. He had, already, more than that. The growth had stopped because the warmth was, on Imel's path, sufficient. The warmth would, from now on, be steady. He smiled. On Sunday at sunset, Nessa Vaught came to the lake park. She sat on the bench. He told her the story. He told her over the course of 1 hour. She did not, in the hour, interrupt. She did not, on his telling, weep. She did not, on his telling, leave. At the end of the hour, she said, "My great-grandmother's name was Imel's brother's apprentice's daughter's daughter. I did not know. I will, from now on, know. Thank you for telling me. Kaelen Vrast. I would like, if you will permit it, to sit at your alcove on Wednesdays." He smiled. He said, "Come." She came. The alcove, the following Wednesday, was 9. Epilogue, a quiet spring. By March, the 7 speakers were a memory. By April, the watchers were a memory. By May, the Voren clan had hosted a small open dinner at the Voren townhouse for the alcove's 9 members. The new matriarch Tiana Voren had served wine. Her daughter Sylvine had served bread. The bread had been Nessa Vant's honey bread. The clan had, on the small private decision of its new generation, begun to be a different clan. By June, the Veilcourt court had received, in a sealed envelope routed through Lyrian's mother, a small description from the late wine merchant speaker of a wooden bird called thrush. The Veilcourt matriarch had, on reading the description, walked to her reliquary, removed the bird, and wounded it. She had wept again. She had, this time, kept winding it. The whistle of the human's voice, in the matriarch's parlor, had played for the 3rd time in 900 years. The matriarch had, by autumn, made the bird available to the public on a single quarterly display at the Dragon Court Museum. By July, Isine had said her first whole-sentence speech at the alcove. The sentence was, "I would like, in 5 years, to refound the Eastern Lamia family on a smaller and kinder basis." The alcove had agreed to help. By August, Subaki Karin had, on her own private resolve, written to her mother and explained, for the first time, what she had done with Kaelen on the November cellar night. Her mother had written back a single line, "I am proud of you. Your father would have been prouder. Come home for the autumn break. We will sit on the porch." Subaki had gone home for the autumn break. She had sat on the porch. By September, Sellers of Reynolds' small house had, on Sylvine's quiet brokering, been formally invited to the Voren clan's annual high court dinner for the first time in 11 generations. The Avrenal matriarch had wept on receiving the invitation. The house had attended. The dinner had been good. By October, Voella Drogan had told her grandmother about the boy on the academy's track. Her grandmother, who was 83 years old and had not, in her long life, been told a single thing that surprised her, had been surprised. She had sat at her own kitchen table with Voella for 2 hours in silence. Then she had said, "The jar in the chamber. I would like, now, to bury it. Will you help me?" They had buried it together that afternoon in the grandmother's own back garden. The grandmother had, 3 weeks later, sent Kaelen a small folded letter through Voella. The letter read only, "Thank you, last one. I am sorry. V's grandmother." By November, Yumirii had, on her senior thesis, submitted a paper to the Academy's lore office titled "On the Misreading of Priors in the Long Quieting Records." The paper had argued, in measured Kitsune language, that the quieting's foundational documents had relied on a series of priors about human faith that were, on close reading, unsupported by the evidence. The paper had been initially rejected by the lore office's senior reader. Sylvine Voren, on hearing of the rejection, had paid a small private visit to the senior reader. The paper had, the following week, been accepted. It had become, by the end of Yumirii's senior year, the most discussed paper the lore office had published in 40 years. By December, Marlowe Vell's mother had, on her own court's pressure, attempted to formalize Marlowe's betrothal to the Eastern succubus heir. Marlowe had refused. Her mother had insisted. Marlowe had, on her refusal, requested an audience with her court's elder council. At the audience she had stated, simply and clearly, that she was in a serious and continuing personal attachment with Kaelen Vrast of the Voren protégé circle, and that she was, on that attachment, ineligible for betrothal. The council had, after a brief and inconclusive private conference, accepted. The betrothal had been cancelled. Marlowe had walked out of the audience and, on the steps of the council chamber in the cold December morning, laughed for 1 full minute by herself before walking to the bakery to find Kaelen. By January of the second year, Nessa Vant's bakery had hired a second apprentice. The apprentice was a young half-blood girl who had been orphaned in a fire and who, on Nessa's quiet selection, had been the closest match to Nessa's own great-grandmother's surviving family records. By February, Lyrian Vasker's 2-year observation had ended 6 months early. She had walked into the alcove on a Wednesday, sat down, said, "Vrast, the trick is real. I do not need 18 more months," bowed, and not asked anything else. She had, since that Wednesday, attended the alcove without further commentary. By spring, Kaelen Vrast had stopped pretending to be a runt hobgoblin. He had, on the Academy's spring registration, walked to the disc and let it read him properly. The disc had lit white. The proctor, a different proctor, the Wraithblood having been retired the previous summer, had stared at the white light and stared at the disc and stared at Kaelen and said, "What?" Kaelen had said, quietly, "Human, the first in 900 years. I am, by my own request, going to be registered under that race. I am, by my own request, going to be in the public record. I have, by the alcove's quiet count, killed every speaker who would have killed me. I have, by my own decision, chosen not to refound and not to replace. I will live my one life as the only one. I will, after that life, leave the world to choose. The disc is, on this morning, telling you the truth. The truth is, human. Will you accept the reading?" The proctor had stared at him. The proctor had walked to the senior master. The senior master had walked to the headmaster. The headmaster, who was a tortoise blood by the Academy's quiet records and who was, by every cohort student's gossip, for 100 years old, had walked to the south yard at his slow, steady pace and looked at the disc and looked at Kaelen and said, "Welcome back, Vrast." The senior master, on the headmaster's words, had filed the registration. By the end of that day, the city had learned. By the end of that week, the country had. By the end of that month, the world had. The world had, in honest fact, the world had, by every quiet alcove count, done a great deal of things. The Vorin clan had, on its new matriarch's instruction, issued a formal public apology for the quieting's contributions. The Vasker court had, on Lyrian's request, issued a parallel apology. The other 5 courts had, in their own time and on their own terms, followed. The 7 apologies, taken together, were not a restoration. They were not, on Kaelen's third path reading, a replacement. They were the world choosing, for itself, what to do with the fact of him. The world chose patience. The world chose study. The world chose, in some quiet quarters, kindness. The world did not, in any official body, propose to refound the human race. The world did not, in any unofficial body, propose to kill the one alive. The world watched. Kaelen Vrast finished his first year at Veilcourt with a registered race of human, a registered rank of unclassified, and a friend group of 9, Sylvine, Yamirii, Vaela, Tsubaki, Marlowe, Lyrian, Isine, Celas, Nessa, plus a small 12-year-old half-blood baker's apprentice and a tortoise-blood headmaster who had begun, on Sundays, to come to the Lake Park bench at sunset to share the honey bread. He started his second year in autumn. He did not, in his second year, perform another miracle in public. He did not need to. The warmth in his ribs was, by his quiet count, the size of a small house, and the size was sufficient. He spent his second year, instead, learning the recipe for the honey bread by heart. By the third year he could make it without looking. By the fourth year he could make it for the alcove's now 11. Nessa's 12-year-old apprentice had asked to be included. The headmaster had asked separately. By the fifth year he had begun to teach Nessa the kitsune principle. Nessa had, on the seeds, become very good. The bakery had expanded. 2 more apprentices. The honey bread was, by the city's quiet consensus, the best bread in 3 districts. By the 10th year he had, with the alcove, written a small history of the quieting. The history had been signed by all 11 of them. The history had been adopted by the world's 7 major courts as the official record. By the 11th year the courts had agreed, on their own initiative, to seal the quieting's old records and to teach, in the schools, the new history instead. By the 20th year, Kaelen Vrast was 37. He was, on the city's records, human, unclassified rank, retired faculty of Veilcourt Academy, private resident of a small house in the old western quarter above the bakery. He was, on the alcove's quiet records, the husband of every member of the alcove, on terms each had negotiated for herself across the slow years. Each had agreed to share. Each had also agreed not to be shared. The arrangement was, by the alcove's own quiet rules, calibrated to each woman's own measure of what she wanted. The arrangement was the alcove's. The arrangement worked. He had, by quiet accident, 2 children of his own, a girl by eye sign, who was, by quiet biology, the only one whose race could produce a viable mixed blood with a human, and a boy by an adoption arrangement with Nessa, who had wanted a child of her own and had asked. By the 30th year, the bakery's honey bread was sold in every major city of the world. By the 40th year, Kaelen Vrast was an old man. He was an old man on the bench by the lake park, on a Sunday at sunset, with a loaf of honey bread in his lap, and a small thrush-shaped wind-up bird in his pocket that the Veilcourt matriarch had bequeathed to him on her death the previous winter. He was alone on the bench. The alcove had, by mutual arrangement, given him this Sunday alone. He had asked them for it. He sat. He wound the bird. The bird whistled. The whistle was the voice of a baker named Imel's brother, who had died 940 years before. The whistle was a small, clear, ordinary human voice, not singing, just being, saying, in a sound that did not need translation, I was here. Kaelen Vrast listened to the whistle until the wind-up wound down. He pocketed the bird. He cut a slice of the honey bread. He ate it. He looked at the lake. He thought, quietly, in the small private way of an old man at sunset. Imel, I was here too. The lake did not answer. The lake did not need to. He had, on the bench, in the small steady warmth he had been carrying in his ribs since the age of 17, the answer he had needed. He went home. The alcove was waiting at the bakery. The dinner was ready. The bread was on the table. He sat down with them. He ate. The world, outside, was quiet. It was a good quiet. End of Book 1.